Good evening and welcome to the Greenfield Public Schools School Committee meeting for Wednesday, October 9th, 2024. This meeting is being recorded by GCTV. If any other persons present are doing the same, you must notify the chairperson at this time. Don't see any. Secretary Deneve, would you please call the roll?
Member Goodwin?
Here.
Member Childs?
Here.
Member Sexton?
Here.
Chair Johnson-Musad?
Here.
Vice Chair Martini?
She is present on the Zoom. Member Martini, can you try to come off mute and say that you are here? Looks like member, I don't know how to mark member Martini at
Is
this
she
time.
visually present? Can you
She's
see her?
visually present, but we're unable to hear her if she's trying to say something.
Is Mayor Disorder present?
Mayor Disorder
virtually?
is not on the Zoom.
Okay. All right. Me, I'm here. Secretary Geneve. And also present is Superintendent Patnode, Assistant Superintendent Sullivan, and Sean Toomey. We're all mostly present and accounted for.
We have a quorum, and the meeting's called to order at 6:04 p.m. Folks who are joining us online, I wonder if they probably need to come on mute so they can hear us. Folks who are online, can you hear us now?
Yes.
Excellent. We're moving into public comment. We're going to start with the people who are here in person and then add the people who are here virtually. The mayor just joined the Zoom. Let's see, Member Martini, are you able to hear us now, and are you here?
I am here and I can hear you, but it's very quiet.
Okay, thanks. I don't think that will help. We can work on our tech. And Mayor Disorder, are you here?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, then we are all present and accounted for at 6:03 p.m. Mayor,
Why can't we see each other?
why can't you see each other?
Why can't we see each other?
I don't know, but you can see some of us, right? Well, I don't know what you're seeing and what you're not seeing, Mayor.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, great.
So on Zoom, you do have an option to choose how many people you see at a time. You can also go through the attendance list and you can click pin, and that way you keep one person on screen. At least in the past, I've been able to do that with Zoom. Another Zoom trick is turning on closed captioning and getting real-time subtitles.
Thank you, Anne. So I was saying before, we're going to start with the public comment with people who are here in the room, and then we will move on to the folks who are joining by Zoom. So Susan Farber. Oh, and everyone will have 3 minutes. Just so folks know, our policy is officially 2 minutes, but our practice recently has been 3, so we're going to keep with 3 for tonight, and starting next month, resume our policy of 2 minutes for public comment. So the secretary will time you. Thank you.
My name is Paul Jablon, and I live here in Greenfield. I hope you have all read the studies and stories that demonstrate that having school resource officers do not stop mass shootings. When my children were in public school, all their 12 years, I expected them to be safe, and I knew that having an SRO was not the way to keep them safe from harm. As some of you know, I was a high school teacher for decades. The first high school I taught in had a school resource officer, and that was the method used to stop fights. Where a fight did occur, the other students would cheer it on. students were suspended regularly. When I transferred to the second high school I taught in, within the first few days I was there, 2 students were starting to get into it in the hallway, and within seconds, 5 or 6 of their peers grabbed them, pulled them apart, and said, "We don't do that here." I was astounded. The teachers, students, and administration had worked together to create a school culture that they all bought into. Every student in the school had an adult, a teacher, who was responsible for them for 4 years. This was their advisory teacher. We called it house, it met daily. And the other students in the advisory also became responsible for one another. If you create a school culture where students are empowered through ongoing conflict resolution, anti-bullying programs, then fights and bullying basically don't occur. In that second high school, we had 2 suspensions in 13 years. We also had a high attendance rate, especially with students who were previously truant. If Greenfield has the money to pay a police officer to be in the schools, let's take that same money and hire 1 or 2 social workers who can work together with teachers on giving students these conflict resolution and anti-bullying skills and other skills, while also working one-on-one counseling the most needy students and their families. SROs are not the answer, and in actuality, many times get in the way of solutions. I just quickly also want to support that this district join
Point of
the
order,
other
I
districts.
can't hear.
We are having problems with an echo in the room related to the audio. We're going to fix it after the speaker. Please bear with us.
Thank you.
Right. One last sentence for that. I just also support joining the other districts and asking for the state to pay for the charter and school choice students. Thank you.
Thank you. And we're going to take a few minutes to try to address our audio issues. The folks on Zoom aren't able to hear us. It creates this
Hello.
echo. So I don't know how the sound is normally done. See?
Am I all set?
Um, Can you do it? Yeah, still an echo.
Hello. Microphone test. All right, thank you. A friend of mine who I consider to be my cousin got into an incident at school one day. His little brother was being teased, and he stood up for him. And the next day, he was attacked at lunch by the kid he stood up to, and it left him concussed. And the kid that punched him hit him so hard that he broke his hand, which is insane. My cousin is not a violent person, never gets into any fights or anything. So the fact that he was left with the concussion and is still suffering some issues from it, both health-wise and mentally, is very frustrating. And as far as I know, the kid was suspended. But that's from word of mouth. I'm not sure if he had any other consequences. And If he hasn't, there needs to be more consequences, other than just like a day or week suspension. If all it takes for if all it takes for someone at school to become violent is someone standing up for the little brother being teased, I think they could be considered a danger to other students at the school. And there needs to be something done about it. I just graduated from Greenfield High School this year, and I have certainly seen some things at the school that have just made me unsettled and I'd say unsafe to a certain degree. I'd never liked using the stall bathrooms. I've always used the singular gender-neutral bathrooms because they're more private. And I never feel safe going into the bathrooms. And after this incident that my cousin had, he doesn't feel comfortable going into the public stall bathrooms, which is totally understandable, especially after what just happened to him. And I think we need more supervision to prevent these things from happening, and to make sure that students feel safe reporting other students if an incident happens, and making sure that if they make a report and the other student finds out, that they don't come after them or attack them for it. So that's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Please state your name.
Yes, Mayor, School Committee, thank you for letting me speak today. I'm actually a Deerfield resident. My name is Dana Levine, and I was asked to come here to speak with you about some of my experiences in the school system. I'm a retired state trooper. I was a trooper for 27 years, and I actually taught the DARE program, if any of you remember that. That was back in the early 2000s. And I got to tell you, my experience being in the school system was a wonderful experience. Now, I taught anywhere from kindergarten all the way up to high school. And they gave me time to talk about all kinds of things, you know, in the early programs, like teaching the kids their address and their mother's phone number, and where a safe place to be would go. And at the high school level, we did things like the pre-prom event, which I will tell you, every high school that we went to that we did the pre-prom event, we got reported back 0 incidences of problems in the school in terms of fighting or anything happening after school where everybody drove away. So we're really proud of the interaction that we had with all the students. But I want to remind you something, that when we went into the elementary school, this is a first opportunity for a lot of these children to meet a police officer for the first time. And it's a really positive environment. It's a really positive interaction that you have. It's a safe place for them to see you, and they're not afraid of you anymore. You know, once they get to know you and you get to share with them some of the stories that's happened to you, you know, on the state police or as a police officer, they were very encouraged to want to share some of their own things with them. I have to tell you that there were a couple of incidences where children have shared with me some things that I had to go to the principal and call social services on, and they felt safe enough to tell me these things. Remember, I was with them a long time. I was at the school anywhere between 1 and twice a week. And just that little amount was enough to get them close to me. We even solved some cases involving school destruction. Just all the kids wanted to be an investigator, and they wanted to find out who was the one that did all the damage to the school, because I got them to come together. This is really to have, now, not every police officer is designed.
That's time. Thank you.
Just one statement. Not every police officer is designed to do this job. So when you're thinking about who is going to go in the school, I suggest that you think very carefully about who is going to be going in there. Okay? Thank you.
Anything, do I? It's all set. Hello,
Just share your name.
I'm Dawn Morin. So I've changed my direction on what I'm going to say. I don't know how many times today. I've added 50 million things. It's been an emotional week for me, so my brain is all over the place. I did make some notes, so just bear with me while I try to keep my emotions in check and not freak out. So first I wanted, my original plan was to come publicly so that everybody knew about the assault that happened to the student that was in school in the middle of the day in the cafeteria. But I know there's people here that are going to be speaking to that actual scenario. So I'm going to change it, but I am kind of curious to know how many of you guys who are expected to vote on this question about SROs tonight actually knew that there was a brutal attack in the middle of the schools in the afternoon at the cafeteria. Because I think you should have all the information for the students when you're in charge of making some of these decisions. So that being said, for those of you who don't know, I own a dance studio. I've been teaching kids in our community and families for 38 years, so that's a lot of families and kids through the door. And I can tell you, I hear the stories from my teens. Sometimes when my own son wouldn't tell me stuff that's going on, I'd hear it from the teen girls that come to class. Families that come in and they're discussing it in the waiting area when in between classes. And you know, I just couldn't wait for my son Jaden, who just spoke earlier, to get out of the school, to be honest. I kept counting down, just 3 more years, 2 more years, just 1 more year, he's out. Okay, no, it's not my problem anymore, I don't care. Well, that's not true. The reality is I now have friends that have kids in school, I have family that have kids in school, and I have dance students who go to the public schools. And so now I'm here today as an additional voice for an SRO. And if anybody thinks that having an SRO is a negative thing, they certainly have not spoken to an SRO or been in a school and followed a one along for the day. I actually reached out to Officer Savine, who is the SRO for the tech school, and that's 700 students. He's been there, the SRO, for 11 years. So you guys can post all your little articles on Facebook about how the social emotional learning and SROs are bad things, but the reality is it's working at the tech school and it's working at other schools. And Officer Sabine did say he'd be willing to come speak, but I waited till the last minute because it didn't even occur to me. And so we need to open up the discussion. We need to invite the people that are actually SROs. We need to invite the schools that are implementing it. 3 years ago, you guys had a chance to vote yes for an SRO, and you voted it down. 3 years later, we're revisiting it. You know why? Because your way's not working. So we need to give this a chance. And at the very least, we need to open up the discussion for the victim that's this family's sitting here today. You owe him that.
Hello?
We can hear you. Just state your name.
Jesus Leva, 88 Deerfield Street, Greenfield. I'm just going to speak really briefly because there's a lot of other people who want to speak, and I've already spoken on this. I sent by email a copy of all of the signatories for the petition that is before the school committee tonight on advocating for additional school funding from the state regarding the charter school issue. So I hope you will consider that as you consider the resolution. And also, Northampton City Council, just so you know, did vote in favor of the resolution last week. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Dave Moscaratolo, Country Club Road, Greenfield. I am the chair of the Public Safety Commission in Greenfield. And usually when I come to meetings and I speak, I say I'm speaking as an individual public safety commissioner, but I've spoken with all the five public safety commissioners, and we're all in agreement here. So I will speak for all of us. I know over the years there's been contention about having a police presence at our schools. As a public safety commissioner, I understand some folks don't trust the police. They may not like the police, or they may be afraid of the police. I know that's real across our country in some areas, but I don't think it justifies not having a plan in place to protect our kids and our teachers. Over the years, we know how much school violence there has been across the country, and we know that there's been horrible gun violence. As a public safety servant, when a situation is brought to my attention, I look at the whole story, I look at many sides, and I would encourage you to look at all sides of the story here and interview officers that are safety officers across Franklin County. I know that the resource officer at Frontier High School, Officer Ravish, I don't know the officer personally, but I've heard great stories. I hear he's outstanding, he's kind, he's compassionate, he's committed to getting to know the students and the teachers and the problems that are there. So I encourage you to reach out when you have these discussions and invite these folks in and really see the whole picture. I mean, what better way to mend relationships is to have someone like that at our schools, so they can learn from the students and the teachers about their feelings, and the officer can learn about they can learn from each other. As a public safety commissioner, I don't always agree with the chief in our departments on every issue, but in this case, I strongly agree with his plan. We need to protect our kids and our students. We need to be proactive. If something tragic happened at one of our schools, I, as a resident and a public safety commissioner, wouldn't be able to sleep at night if we didn't have some type of plan in place. These plans don't have to last forever. Things change over time. We have bigger problems with our nation, but we need to be proactive and have a plan. We need to listen to the parents. I know there's a financial cost to this, but how much are our kids worth? We can start somewhere, we can see if it works, we can move forward, we can change it, but something has to be done, and we have to have some proactive planning in place. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much, and I thank you for what you do for the city.
Michael, and then Melissa.
Just to save time between speakers, if the person who's on deck can come a little closer, maybe in the chair in the front row, then we can get to the next speaker more quickly.
Michael Master-Tataro, Greenfield. Two things I think that need transparency when it comes to the school department is how it spends its money, and public safety. And when things happen in the public school system, the residents of the city should know about it. It shouldn't be attempted to be buried. It shouldn't be attempted to resolve itself within the school without parents being notified. There is a place for a school resource officer. I think people are burying their heads in the sand when it comes to this. David brought it up previously. This is nationwide issue, gun violence, and it happens in small towns, smaller than Greenfield. A school resource officer is only as good as
who the chief puts in place. Certain personalities are not for that job, but there are personalities that are. Shelter in place. You guys practice shelter in place for a reason. I think the schools would be much safer with a police officer that is looking out for the kids. I don't might have much else to say about it, but I do know that I know at least 3 teachers in the high school, that want an SRO. So I don't know if you're speaking to the staff as well about this issue, but if the teachers want it, I would think there's a reason for it. But that's all I have to say about this. But I hope you consider rethinking the whole issue. Thank you.
Hello, Melissa Webb. I live here in Greenfield. I was looking over some of the stuff on the agenda tonight, and I noticed that we are starting to move forward with redistricting, possibly. And then I also decided to listen to last month's school committee, today, because that's, great. But what I did notice was some talk about the discussion about the 45 families at the hotel and how that numbers are forever constantly changing. And I know in the beginning of redistricting or redrawing the lines, those families were not taken into account. I also did send an email with my street noticings that it looks like we're doing the same thing we already did, which was circled out one group and just moved that group to a different school. So I have concerns about how we're drawing the lines if we're keeping our schools neighborhood, because there is another complex right next to Oak Courts that's also connected to Oak Courts that's part of the same housing complex that now are going to 2 separate schools. And again, back to the 45 revolving families at Days Inn, that I don't see that situation changing. I know that those numbers were not necessarily in the original plan, because at the time it was a place where people could go and spend a night or two, not sadly live there for a year or 2. I also did hear something about the mayor had mentioned there might possibly be some money. And my next question is the money going to the schools? Is it going to where the kids are going from the hotels? Is it going to I'm going to say almost a whole classroom I watch get off the bus at AEL? Is it going to AEL adequately? Is it going to the elementary schools adequately? Is it going to GMS adequately? If we have that few extra dollars, are we really going there and showing up for the kids in that context, not just emotional and social, but also financially, and making sure they have extra things? Last year at Newton, we had a bunch of different things up that had different touches for things, because not all kids speak English. I've been in the building a lot this year, and I haven't noticed that. I haven't noticed the picture of the toilet. I know it sounds silly, but things like that we're really making sure are there for our students who do come from situations where English is not the primary language. So, I'd love to share some positive news. PTO had a lot of fun walking in the parade. We had a lot of fun making and building a float. We are currently working on something for Scarecrow in the park, and there is possible talk about the district PTO doing either something for the light parade. There's a 3 sorry, I know I'm over time now. The light parade, the light up the fairgrounds, or the Festival of the Trees. So we have a group discussion about one of those 3 options. Thank you.
Thank you.
Doug and then Cambry.
Good evening, Doug Selwyn, Greenfield. I've written to you, so I'm going to keep this really short around the police issue. I very much appreciate police wanting to prevent violence. I think we all do. The research suggests that it's not the most effective way to go to make the changes we're hoping for. I would rather see, as Paul said earlier, work at the front end to work with the kids in the community before things happen, rather than have somebody on hand who can come in when needed. There's no one solution that's going to prevent all violence, certainly, but the more we can do to have the students and teachers and community in the school work together for the benefit of each other, I think the better. And so I would urge us to spend whatever money we have on social workers and family support workers and supporting folks in the community. So anything we can do in that direction seems to me more effective. I mean, I note that there is now a group in the state challenging the limits on guns in the state. As a society, we have a lot to work on. It's not just in our schools, and again, I don't think police are the answer. And so, switching to a different issue, I would really urge you to support the resolution that's before you tonight related to the state picking up money that follows kids to other schools, including charter schools. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Cambry. I have two students that go to the Greenfield High School. My son was one of them that was involved in the incident on September 17th. He was in the lunchroom. He's never been in an altercation ever in his life. He's never had any issues. The kid came up behind him and he took a blow to the back of the head, fell, hit his jaw on a table and a chair, and he kept getting multiple blows to the back of his head. And it finally got broken up by the principal and the assistant principal. This kid broke his hand on the back of my son's head. My son suffered with 3 lacerations. He was soaked in blood. His sweatshirt was soaked in blood. When I got to the school, it was very scary. Sorry, I'm shaking now. So I'm up here to kind of speak to everybody, and I think that people should know what's going on, and it's been really difficult trying to figure out a plan and what we can do. And I've also reached out to superintendent a couple times, never received a single phone call back from her. My son has still to this day not been able to do a full day in school due to his concussion and other things that is going on because of this incident. And I just keep hearing that, like, police officers aren't going to work. Then what is going to work? Because whatever is now happening in the school is not working. So why not try to do what we can to change this and see if this would work? I don't understand that. This should have never even happened. This is my son's senior year, and he's barely been able to go to school now. I've lost track of where I am now. It just really frustrates me. This really frustrates me because prior to this happening, because he had stuck up for his little brother, I had warned the school that I've been hearing things. I've warned the school that something else might be taking place, and multiple kids knew something was going to happen, and nobody ever spoke up about it. This was brewing for a week. I just don't know why people wouldn't want our kids to be protected at all costs. Why not try something new, like getting an SRO officer in our schools? I went to Turner's High School. I had an SRO in my high school. It worked out wonderfully. Nobody was scared. Like, there was not many problems there. So it just mind blows me that this has happened. My son, yeah, he just can't even finish a day of school, so All right, thank you.
I'm Susan D'Onofrio, and I'm going to pretty much repeat what my daughter just said. I have 2 grandchildren in the Greenfield school system. 3 weeks ago, one of my grandsons was physically attacked by another student who repeatedly punched him in the back of the head. This assault took place during lunch in the high school cafeteria. Principal Browning and the associate principal were both in there at the time of the assault and broke up the incident. My daughter was called by the school to inform her that her son was injured. My daughter immediately brought him to the emergency room for a head injury. Since that day, 3 weeks ago, my grandson suffers from headaches, nausea, and blurred vision. He is unable to make it through a school day. I am here today to make sure that all the parents are aware of the violence that has taken place in our schools and ask that we all do the right thing for the safety of our children and demand a resource officer in all our schools. Thank you.
Hi. Don D'Onofrio, 10 Michaelman Ave, Greenfield. My grandson was the one that was involved in the altercation at the school. I guess my reason for being here today is more about what transpired after the altercation. Landon was brought to the emergency room, as was the other student. This was not called upon by the school at all. It was by his mother and by the other student's mother. They both received injuries. We went to the school to get an incident report to find out what happened. This went on over a 2-week period of time. Counselors, teachers, principal, assistant principal, superintendent, crickets, nothing. No response from anybody. We didn't know whether we should report it to the police department. We waited 3 weeks yesterday. Finally made the decision last Friday. We better go to the police and just make it known about this incident, because everybody that we were talking to had no idea. Nobody was talking to each other. It was almost like they wanted this to go away. There was an injury at that school, 2 injuries, both kids. Could have been a lot more serious, but they were serious enough as far as I was concerned. My grandson's still out of school because of it. They talk about school resource officers and not being the fix to all this. I have to disagree with that, and I think everybody's missing the opportunity. This is a real opportunity to get a school resource officer in here, build a foundation for these young kids at this school, and let them grow on that. And I guarantee you, a lot of problems will go away. We're in the days of cell phones, social media. I can't tell you how many different people had pictures of my grandson on their phones, and everybody sending text messages, and nobody ever addressed the problem. These problems don't go away. For all anybody knows in this whole room right here, right now, my grandson could have a screw loose, the other kid could have a screw loose. Nobody addressed it. Nobody brought those 2 kids into the principal's office and said, sit down, we're gonna talk this out, we're gonna find out how this happened. Nothing. And you wonder why people wander into schools after being bullied and things go on and terrible things happen. It's because there's no communication at all. And a school resource officer in this school is educated to look out for things that are coming down the road, and he assess scenes, make sure that he can mitigate something, bring it to the police's attention if he thinks it's bigger than what he can handle. But you got eyes and ears out there, and nobody's using them, nobody's communicating, and as far as I'm concerned, we're heading for disaster. So we ought to do something about it. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Empress, and I'm chair of the Greenfield Human Rights Commission. I just want to say to this young man and this young man's family over there, I feel that as a school committee, as a city, that we did not protect him or his human rights, and that's a problem. We need to do better. It happened to him this time. It could be your son or your daughter next time. A lot of times when we see these school shootings in these schools, what's the first thing we hear people say? Oh, it can't happen here. It can happen right here in Greenfield. And then what are you going to tell us? What are you going to tell? Because I have a son in high school. I have a son in middle school. If something was to happen, a mass shooting, and my son got injured, what could anybody on this school committee tell me? Sorry, that's not going to work, especially when we're here today pleading with you to protect our children. You have a right to protect our children, and our children deserve to be protected. There's so much to jump around, but anyway, there was 2 studies that was given out in the email that I seen. I also want to say, when we're talking about school safety, this is not a left issue. This is not a right issue. This is a human rights. This is our kids' safety issue. If you're sending out documentation for reference material, it should not be based on one side's political views. That's wrong. So that was study 2. Study 1, however, did say that some of these situations where they did have issues with the police officers, it's because the teachers themselves could not tolerate the disruption of the young people. And it also said a lot of it had to do with the student's relationship with the teacher and the number of interruptions in class. So therefore, when these SRO officers did get involved with disciplinary actions, it was the teachers who brought them into the situation. This is a whole different, and another thing I want to say, I'm so tired of hearing this data about black and brown families. Can we just stop that? You're taking a national figure. This is not national, this is Greenfield. And I don't know how many black and brown families in Greenfield was surveyed how we feel about it. And I'll tell you right now, I want CRO officers in school to protect my kids. So can we just stop saying that as far as a black and brown issue? Because I don't think that nobody has the right to say that, especially if you're not asking us, black and brown people in Greenfield, how we feel about it. And the black and brown people I talk to, they want their kids protected. They want SRO officers. There was also another study that was sent out in the email as far as some other data as far as, no need for the SRO officers. Now, that was and that was done in July 24th in 2023. Do you realize the same year that they published that, there was 340 school shootings last year? That's the highest on record since 1966. I'm begging y'all to please do your job and protect our kids. Thank you.
Hi, Crystal Cleaver, 45 Russell Street here in Greenfield. I am a parent of a 6-year-old who goes to Federal Street School. I'm also a social worker in the community who works with families and children, and so I feel pretty well equipped to talk about this. I want to say I have heard about the incident that happened at the high school. I work with teens who go to the high school, and I know that if something like that happened to my child, I would not be as calm and controlled as the family in this room was. I can say that. However, my child is autistic and has ADHD, and just as that family spoke to their child's needs, I have to speak to my child's needs. I'm concerned about the possibility of putting an SRO in our schools. I've worked with SROs in other school districts as a social worker. I know that there's a particular kind of SRO that can be quote unquote successful, but the truth for me is that my kid has behaviors that don't always make sense to adults. He gets anxious, he has trouble processing information and following directions when he's overwhelmed. People believe, at times adults believe, that my child's being rude or ignoring them. That's not true, and that's not what's happening for him. He needs more time, and he needs different methods to understand what's happening and for him to be understood. My child stims when he's nervous, and that includes movements with his hands and his face. And we've all heard stories in the news about autistic people being harmed by police who make assumptions about their behavior, who get frustrated by their noncompliance, who see their stims and other body movements as threatening. And I sent an email earlier, I linked to some articles about that, and I just want to say that my kid's life is just as valuable as anybody else's. If this passes, I hope that it doesn't. I think that we can do way better than this as a community. I think there was a lot missing in this incident that happened, and that there's a lot missing in the high school that we could look at to keep our kids safe. I don't think being reactionary and throwing police into our schools is the answer. I believe that if an SRO is put into this school district for my child, that would mean finding an out-of-district placement. Because my kid can't be safe. Autistic kids are 7 times more likely to be interacting with police, and their behaviors are often read and misunderstood. And so I'd ask you to please vote against the request for police in public schools, and for us to have a community conversation about what actually works. Thank you.
Thank you. That ends the public comment for people in the room. We'll now move to people on Zoom who wish to make public comment. If you are capable of clicking on reactions and clicking raise hand, that will make it easier to see who would like to make a public comment. And we will start with Ursa. Ursa, if you could say your full name.
Good evening. My name is Ursa Shearer. I live on Madison Circle here in Greenfield. I have a son at Federal Street School, and I wanted to come and speak, namely to voice my strong belief that SROs, from the data, do not seem to overwhelmingly make schools safer, that we see this increase year over year in the number of mass shootings in schools, which is incredibly distressing, but we also see increases in SROs. And so it doesn't seem like the solution there, but I also wanted to take this opportunity, having heard about the incident, which I am just hearing about tonight, of how incredibly sorry I am to everybody that was involved, the students, parents, the entire school system gets traumatized by events like that. And it sounds like there were a lot of missed opportunities in the week leading up to the incident. Then you had the 2 most senior leaders in the school in the cafeteria when it happened, which did not prevent something. And it sounds like a lot of missed opportunities since the incident has happened. And I don't feel like introducing an SRO necessarily changes the course of what transpired. I don't know that there's a perfect solution, but in my mind, the more we are able to work upstream through additional supports like guidance counselors, arts, music, ways for kids to be able to move their bodies, the type of engaging curriculum that you need, all of these things conspire to help us build really healthy school environments. And that's where I would want our attention and resources focused. And I also just wanted to speak very personally that my son, who's in Greenfield Public Schools, is a Black student in the classroom. He's not someone who feels safer when he sees a police officer. He hasn't individually had a negative experience, but he is surrounded by media messages that show what happens to kids who look like him and kids that are older than him, and what can happen over the course of his life. So I just want to also give voice that at least in this one instance, there is a Black student in Greenfield Public Schools. He's my kid, who is not made to feel safer when he's in police presence, and wanted to make sure that that was part of the discourse as well. Thank you so much.
If you're on Zoom and you want to speak, please raise your hand.
I don't know how to do that.
Oh. Kelly, were you saying you wanted to speak?
Yes, I'm not sure if it's unmuted or not. I have a kid in the high school, and I have a 7-year-old daughter in the Federal Street School. And I feel an SRO would be best in the high school. And I feel that there needs to be something done at the Federal Street School, as I'm feeling my child is very unsafe there, with there being like 4 exits in the back and kids not being well watched in the morning, on top of a level 3 sex offender coming to the school to pick up their child, and that's okay. Something needs to be done though, because I've heard about a lot of sexual assaults with my friends' children happen at that Federal Street School.
Kelly, you suddenly went quiet.
Oh, I'm done. Sorry.
You're done. Okay, can you say your last name, please, Kelly?
Jackman?
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, baby.
Is there anyone else on Zoom who'd like to speak?
Excuse me, I just left Zoom because I got thrown off, so.
Oh,
put me in the chat.
please join.
Glad I live nearby.
Just share your name when you come up to the microphone.
Hi, my name is Pamela Goodwin. I live at 54 High Street. I'm going to speak in support of the SRO. I taught school for probably close to 30 years. A lot of it was in the Greenfield school system. I agree about the DARE officers. When I was teaching in the 7th and 8th grade, the high school boys were chewing tobacco. And we had people come in who had mouth cancer as a presentation, for example. I also know that there's only a nurse or 2 in a building. The guidance counselors are busy. And I agree with Officer Levine and a few of the other people about it builds a relationship. I want to bring to mind, I think it was a year or 2 ago, a member of the school committee outwardly called out a high school girl who had written an opinion page and said that was not true. So I also think that things that happen in the school system need to be talked about, dealt with, not swept under the rug. And we were all pretty appalled that a girl who was courageous enough, the age of this young man, would talk about what it's like in the high school. That was a particular high school thing. I think a lot of stuff goes on in the restrooms. I certainly saw it. We brought in a huge bullying program when I was teaching in the middle school over here in town. Everybody learned that there's no such thing as an innocent bystander, that you have to hold people accountable. And I know the teachers do a good job, but I also never allowed any bullying in my classroom. I saw it everywhere else in the hallway. I used to break up fights between kids, but once they came into my classroom, everybody was treated with kindness, decency. I expected the same kind of behavior, and they rose to my level of expectations. So I just really think it's important to establish other people around where they can also feel like they can go and have a conversation. And again, a long time ago, I was tutoring one-on-one. I guess a kid pulled a knife on the superintendent's son. He was suspended, expelled actually for the year. I worked with him in the superintendent's office next door, and it turned out that Jeremy was protecting little kids of color, and he was a little bit older, and that's what that was about. So people just need to learn how to behave. Kids are at a very tender age. I don't care if they're preschool, but they're especially at a tender age as they approach middle school, all the way through. To have a kid that has to have that kind of trauma in his senior year, what about the kids who witnessed the whole thing? That's traumatizing for everybody in the room. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the room or on Zoom who would like to speak? Okay, thank you all for the public comment. We'll now move to the student report to the school committee.
All right. So starting with student council, last week the student council hosted a successful homecoming event with about 300 students in attendance. That same day, 20 student council members helped with the Green River cleanup, and our group was tasked with the bike path. Students cleared many bags of trash, tires, and shopping carts throughout the day. This Friday, 18 students will be heading to the Regional Fall Conference, which will be held at Minnechaug. Our keynote speaker is Rob Surratt, who is an artist from Disney and will give an inspirational speech while speed painting on the stage. Students will also have the opportunity to attend two student-led workshops while networking with leaders across Western Massachusetts. Friday, October 18th, GHS will participate in Pink Out for breast cancer awareness. The Student Council is going to donate 25 cents for every student and staff member wearing pink and donate the money to the Rays of Hope Foundation. In regard to athletics, Mesa Verde is sponsoring an Athlete of the Week for Greenfield Athletics. We want to thank Amy for her commitment to the youth of Greenfield High School. The first to be honored were volleyball player Stella Verlander and football player Jonathan Brior, both of which are seniors, so go seniors. Schedules for all sports games are on arbiterlive.com. French Club recently hosted a French film movie night where the students watched a French movie and enjoyed fall treats together. Over a dozen students have signed up for the France trip in April 2026, and French Club looks forward to fundraisers and other preparations for that trip. Drama Club continues to meet bi-weekly to bond with one another and prepare for auditions in November. The Library Club is hosting the 5th annual Comic-Con on Wednesday, October 30th from 3 to 6:15 p.m. Students, teachers, and guest speakers will present on topics ranging from tabletop role-playing games to origami making to the history of jazz drumming. Our keynote speaker this year is Luangi Beaumontes, which I'm very sorry for mispronouncing, a local Puerto Rican young adult author who just published a spooky romance called Till the Last Beat of My Heart. And the Trivia Club team continues to meet weekly during lunch to study. We've been focused on literature, simple machines, geography, and science and math. We've had 4 regulars routinely showing up and are making a lot of strong progress. And finally, a new club at GHS is the Students of Color Club. Students continue to work on the lesson plan to address racialized language in the school for 8th grade advisories. The group will be presenting to administration and then the whole faculty in a couple of weeks. And they wanted to send a special thanks to the recent activities fair, which helped gain new membership. If you have any questions for me or about the report, I'd be happy to answer.
Any questions for Shane? Thank you very much. Because of the public interest in the school resource officer question, I'd like to hear a motion to move item 7A, school resource officer in schools, from where it is to now.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Can we have a roll call vote on that, please?
I'm sorry, who made the motion?
Anne, and then seconded by Melody.
Okay. All right, so the motion is to bring the topic up for now.
Yep.
Okay. Roll call vote. Member Goodwin?
Yes.
Member Childs?
Yes.
Member Sexton?
Yes.
Chair Johnson-Musad?
Yes.
Vice Chair Martini?
Yes.
Mayor DeSorger?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, so that passes unanimously to move it up to now.
Okay. So the item listed on the agenda is school resource officer in schools. There was a motion made by Mayor DeSorger and seconded by Melody Goodwin that the school committee begin a comprehensive study and deliberation process to evaluate the potential addition of a school resource officer to our school district. That motion was made and discussed at the last meeting. The vote on it was 3-3. My summary, and I'd welcome others to fill in context or share your perspective, but was that because the school committee has very recently deliberated about whether or not to have school resource officers in schools, the motion was essentially whether the school committee wants to take this up as a comprehensive study and deliberation process. The discussion, as described in our minutes, was previous school committee has discussed and voted not to have SRO in schools, cautioned to members not to openly discuss school security systems, does police presence in schools prevent shooting tragedies, and police in schools can be triggering to some students. So with that, I guess since the motion was about whether or not we should take up a major deliberation and study process, I just would encourage members to I guess to keep the focus on that. The question is whether or not we should really study it and bring it back up again. And so we're taking that up, I guess. Could I have I think we can just, maybe the mayor knows a little more about Robert's Rules of Order. How do we take up an item that was tabled? Does just having it on the agenda sufficient, Mayor? Do you know?
No, you have to take it from the table.
Okay, so I'd like to have a motion to take that motion from the table. Motion from Member Goodwin, is there a second? Motion from Member Childs. And can we have a roll call vote on that, please, Member Deneve, whether to take up that motion again?
Okay. Mayor DeSorger?
Yes.
Member Goodwin?
Yes.
Member Childs?
Yes.
Member Sexton?
Yes.
Chair Johnson Musad?
Yes.
Vice Chair Martini?
Yes.
And I'm a yes.
Okay.
So it's unanimous to be taken off the table.
All right, it is on the table, or it's off the table. We're looking at it. So any additional discussion on this item? Member Childs.
So I did a little bit of digging because I needed the contextual background for myself. So what I found is that basically I went back to 2020, where there was a budgetary issue for the SRO position, where previously it had been half-funded police department, half-funded school department. Police department was saying it was no longer in their budget, and pretty much what ended up happening was December 31st, 2020, then Governor Baker signed a police reform bill that eliminated the SRO requirement in schools, which kind of gave Greenfield the leeway to be like, okay, let's not have it in the budget. Then jumped to fall of 2021. There's more talk about behavioral difficulties, safety challenges in school, and the resolution that unanimously passed November 22nd, 2021 was, and this is quoting directly from the minutes of that meeting, Casey moved as part of a multi-tiered support system sensitive to equity issues in our schools that the school committee direct the superintendent to begin discussions with the chief of police on safety and security support options from his department for our schools and report back to the school committee. Jump to spring 2022. January, there was just a very short update, and the bigger update came in the February 9th, 2022 meeting, timestamp 3514, if you want to jump right to it, that the summary was that the school would need to support any position financially. The police department could not support that staffing. I went through 4 years of meeting minutes and meetings. I did not watch all those meetings. I'm not that insane. Turns out YouTube has a lovely transcript. You can search for terms. The searches that I did, just so that if anyone wants to replicate them, they can, were for SRO and for police. That was the last I found of this report that we were expecting back from the superintendent for safety and security options from the police department for the schools. So, Karen, do you happen to remember anything that Dr. DeBarge managed to come up with past that, or was the financial issue the roadblock? To my recollection, it was the financial issue. Okay. So, yes, history lesson over.
Thank you for that context. Appreciate your research. Yes. Member Sexton.
It turns out that Anna and I were sort of doing similar research in parallel, and this is why scientists should talk to each other. I went back a little bit further to 2018. This was when Greenfield still did have an SRO. They had one at the time, and the question on the table was whether to go from 1 to 3. And there was quite a bit of, at one of the school committee meetings, which I did watch, because I'm a glutton for punishment sometimes. I did watch that, and there was additional testimony given at the city council meeting around that same time. And the comments from the public then were against broadening the numbers of SROs that we had, and that had nothing to do with whether or not it was a budgetary matter, and that had everything to do with what people were advocating for in our schools. And I do want to say that I do deeply sympathize with what the family, and particularly those students, are going through. And I can't know, none of us can know for certain if having an SRO would have prevented that incident, and it certainly wouldn't have done anything around the issue of communication with our administrators that is being reported to us. I would personally like to hear more from, I believe that there were some members of our current committee who were part of the previous formation of the committee that did some of that study when this question was being taken up in 2021, 2022, et cetera. So I would like to hear more about, are any of those questions that were undertaken, are any of those unsettled? Or have we heard anything that was not previously addressed, that was addressed in that prior study that was done? Every time that this issue has come up, it has been somewhat divisive for our community. And every time it's come up, we've also heard, I would say, the majority and the vast majority of the emails that I have received about this issue have been not to have an SRO in our schools. So I just want to be clear that we are hearing from we are hearing from lots of sides, all sides, lots of perspectives, but the vast majority that I have heard are not to reopen this discussion.
Member Goodwin?
There's a piece of the history, because I lived it, which was not just about SROs, but attendance officers. And one of the key issues is for children who aren't attending school, if you call a DCF worker or a social worker, they can knock on the door, but it takes a police officer to find out what's going on behind the door for many of our children. And so I know in my school budget, I offered to cut things to get a school attendance officer because I felt strongly there were over 40 children who were chronically absent in my school, and I needed help. And that was the only person I thought who could give us the help we needed. So I know that was spoken because I spoke to it at different meetings. So that wouldn't have shown up under your police search, it would have showed up under an attendance.
Thank you. Member Deneve?
I recall a little bit of this history. When we discussed this last time, we were flooded with students who came to speak to us. So many students came and spoke, and they were all against it. And you might think, well, of course the children don't want this going on, but they had very compelling reasons, and they came to us with trauma from police encounters and fear that things would only get worse if there was an SRO on campus. So my initial thought is I want to hear what the students have to say, and my first priority is always the success of our student body. And then the second priority in my mind was what did the teachers have to say, and they came and were very present and said that they did not want this. So that's where we were with the public comment last time that we visited this. The other part, there were 3 parts to it that I really recall. The public comment, the second part was that financially it wasn't something that we could do. We couldn't even keep Spanish in the middle school. Like, we were having real budgetary problems. So it wasn't really feasible to do it. The other issue was that we weren't provided data that this would be worthwhile. So if we're going to discuss this, I'd like to know specific dates when in the last 10 years the response time for having an SRO on site versus dispatch has made a difference. I'd like to know actual data about that, because we have not been given data by our police chief or by anyone from the GPD. Nobody's given us actual data. I've been sent articles that I can easily go and find on my own. That's it. No actual data about our community specifically. So that would be the place to even start. So those are the 3 points. The students didn't want it, the teachers didn't want it, we couldn't afford it, and there was no data. So those are 3 boxes that are gonna have to be seriously checked and researched before I think we go through with this. And I understand that when people think about protection and safety, for some communities, that looks like SROs. That looks like policing. Like some communities want that. I understand. It works in some places, maybe. I don't know. But from what I've seen here, that's not what people want. And I hope that we can strengthen our relationships with our student body, and I hope that we can empower the administration to reach out to the greater student body and improve communication. And I hope that we can hire more behavioral specialists, guidance counselors. That's what I'd like to do with that money.
Thank you. A reminder that the motion we're speaking to is whether to take up this, begin a comprehensive study and deliberation process to evaluate the potential of an SRO in our school district. Member Childs?
Would it be possible
And then the mayor.
Would it be possible to alter the resolution to make a little bit of a friendly amendment so it's not quite so SRO specific and gear it more towards investigating what we could do to improve safety and also studying where the safety concerns are? Because I didn't know about that attack that happened at the high school. So I do think we need more information, and I think this resolution as is far too limiting and inflexible, especially when we don't know, we're voting without knowing what the specific program in mind would be and what alterations, like, okay, I'm biased towards the comfort dog. Anything that gets kids able to pet a puppy, I'm gonna want to figure out how to. And sorry, aside from that, I'm being very ineloquent here. My issue here is I know you wanted us to be focusing on this narrowly, but we do need a broader approach to what are all of the variables at play, how could we make the schools safe, what will work for Greenfield specifically, and what are Greenfield's needs. And just a simple yes, down, should we discuss SRO is so limiting, and it closes down a discussion that I'm worried we won't reopen to look at other things that can be done to improve safety or other areas where the kids are vulnerable, where we can help them. Sorry if that made no sense.
To answer your question, members can ask the person who made the motion whether they would accept a friendly amendment, and then that could be accepted by them and the person who seconded. You just need to be completely clear about what the amendment is that you're requesting. And now to the mayor.
So, Ian, thank you for all the research that you did on that. That was rather impressive. So I think it's important for us as school committee members that we actually have all of the information to make up our minds about something. I think it was interesting to note. I heard what Ian said. I don't think most of us knew that this event occurred, that there were injuries, and that 2 people went to the hospital. And I think that's an important step for us to start with. How can we make up our minds if we don't know? There's a real important thing here in a hospital. You have HIPAA. There's different things that we have in the school about what we should know or shouldn't know. But as school committee members, knowing that there's an altercation with injuries is something I think we should be informed about. That would help us make up our minds. I would accept a friendly amendment. I think that listening to the stories tonight, I think we want our police to have a presence, even if it was at the beginning and the end of school with Frank. But we should be taking a look at this, and it sounds to me if we needed somebody somewhere, it might be at the high school. So I would be in favor of taking a look at that and taking a look at it in a different format, before and after school, or or in school, but I think we owe the children that, to take a look at that and protect their safety. And I also think that as school committee members, we should take a look at what we would ask to be informed about, not details, but injuries. Thank you.
I'm just going to say that what the public can come and speak to us about in public comment is very broad. You can come and tell us anything you want, tell stories, but as school committee members, we just need to continue to be careful about respecting the boundaries between our role in terms of setting policy and budget and not getting involved in the day-to-day operations. And it's really the superintendent's purview to oversee the response to situations that, like the ones that were mentioned in public comment. It's not our job to kind of get into the details of a particular incident at a particular school. Are there any other comments? Member Deneve, and then what?
I have a comment after
Member
Member
Martini
Deneve.
first. Please go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, I wanted to say thank you to Member Childs for doing that research, and also for your suggestion of a friendly amendment to this motion, because I also think that it's not comprehensive to entertain a study that is only of the possibility of bringing back an SRO or SROs to Greenfield. If that's the only thing that's being studied, then that's very limiting in terms of what the district can do to increase safety. And I would be interested in a much broader, truly comprehensive discussion about that. I do want to say that Greenfield does have safety plans in place, but we don't necessarily talk about them in a public forum because that would reduce security for the district. So that's something that the committee has addressed regularly in our executive sessions, and something that our former superintendent, I haven't had a chance yet with our new superintendent, but that our former superintendent made herself very available to me personally to ask lots of specific questions about, so that I could feel like I really understood where we stand with the comprehensiveness of our security practices. I have heard a lot of folks talking about essentially two things. One is school behavior, and the other one being gun violence. And in terms of school behavior, Member Childs, I can share my recollections about our previous discussions on this committee about that, because what's most memorable for me is our discussion in 2021, because like many other schools, we were experiencing a very high level of very challenging behaviors in school. And so there was quite a vociferous public discussion about that. And my recollection aligns with Member Geneve's. We had a lot of students in particular come and speak to us, and my recollection is that the majority of them, probably the overwhelming majority, did not want to have a police officer in their school. And in terms of gun violence, that's something that I think we have to rely on data about, and actual real things that we have learned, hopefully, from others' experiences. It is not forgotten for me that having an SRO in Parkland did not help. Having an entire school police department in Uvalde did not help to prevent those tragedies from occurring. So I am not at all convinced that having an SRO would prevent something like that here or anywhere else. And I would also like us to remember a couple of things that are really important. And for me, this comes from my experience partly as a social worker, like one of our public commenters tonight. I spent a lot of my career working with children and families for whom interactions with the police are very threatening and anxiety provoking. And I would be really worried about the impact on vulnerable students in some of our populations because of that. And I would also just like to respond to one comment from another member about making calls to DCF and having that not be effective, to have a social worker knock at the door and needing a police officer to get in and find out what is wrong. Having been a DCF social worker for a very long time and having responded to many reports of students not attending school, I would just like to say that I never once had the need to involve a police officer in order to address that problem. And so I just wanted to note that. Now, I would like us to remember, in light of those experiences of mine, that Greenfield Public Schools has a history, and a very recent history, of engaging in disproportionate exclusionary discipline against students of color and disabled students. We only just got out from under scrutiny from the state about that, and I would like us to be very mindful that we're not far away from those issues, and in fact, we still have largely segregated schools in Greenfield, and we just heard our student representative talking about the need to address racialized language at GHS. We have to be really cognizant of how those students will be, how certain students will be affected, potentially by having an SRO. And lastly, I have previously asked this committee to view every decision through a lens of how disabled students will be affected. And that's because I come from the perspective of being a parent of 2 children with disabilities, and from the perspective of having 2 beloved nephews who, like one of our public commenters, are autistic and would very likely have some of their mannerisms and behaviors be misinterpreted by a person who could harm them in interactions with police. So I would really like the committee to please center students with disabilities when they're considering this decision, who, according to research that I am aware of, are more likely to face punitive and negative interactions with an SRO. So those would be my comments. I would not support the motion as is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Member Neve?
I wanted to speak to the amendment. I agree with Member Childs that we should have a comprehensive discussion about what's going on, because I didn't know about what occurred at the high school either. I also know that there are a number of things around that that are not in our purview, but I'd like to know the details of how and when, and we will be informed of things that rise to a certain threshold. And the problem that I have is with the amendment. I think that the original motion of bringing up discussion of whether or not to add an SRO into the school, if we brought that off the table, then we need to have a vote about that specific motion, and then I'd like to see another motion made about having a comprehensive discussion of security measures, revisiting them and seeing if there are new things that we can apply. But having them smushed together, I think, is just a way to also just open the door to whatever. So I think that we should just take independent votes on that. But I could not support the motion as is.
Any other discussion? Just to be clear, there has not been a request for an amendment to the motion, so the motion we've taken up from the table still stands. So let's, if people are ready, we can go ahead and vote on that. Okay. So the motion was that the school committee begin a comprehensive study and deliberation process to evaluate the potential addition of an SRO, school resource officer, to our school district. So a yes vote would say that the school committee will begin the comprehensive study and deliberation process, and a no vote would mean that we would essentially not take that up and not begin working on that in depth. Any questions before we vote?
So, sorry, I'm trying to figure out the way, because I had my question a moment ago. We will be able to make a new amendment right after this vote then? Not amendment, sorry, new motion, right after this vote then?
We could hear motions related to the topic of school resource officer in schools. We can also, under new business, members can make motions that we take up other items such as, something else.
Okay, I think it will be related enough to SRO that there will be a new motion after, okay.
Okay, all right. So we'll now vote on the motion that is currently, that we're currently looking at. Member Deneve, would you please call a roll call vote?
Of course. Vice Chair Martini?
No.
Member Goodwin?
Yes.
Member Childs?
No.
Member Sexton?
No.
Chair Johnson-Musad?
No.
Mayor DeSorger?
Yes?
And I am a no, so the motion fails.
Thank you. Member Childs, you have another motion?
Okay. I would like to move that the school committee begin a comprehensive study and deliberation process of what our safety needs are and evaluate what potential solutions will improve our safety measures.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion?
Okay.
Mayor, did you say something? Oh, you second, okay.
No, I just seconded Ian's motion.
Okay. Is there any discussion?
I have a question.
The recording secretary has a question. Yes, Susan Farber.
I would like Member Childs, please, to repeat that motion slowly.
Sorry. 'Cause I was partially cribbing it. So school committee begin a comprehensive study and deliberation process to evaluate safety needs and what solutions would work in Greenfield to address those needs. So that way everything's on the table.
Okay, discussion, and I think Member Martini?
I just had a question, which relates to what I said earlier about the need for the committee to keep our safety procedures, especially certain parts of them, out of a public forum in order to maintain security in the district. And I don't really know how that would work. So I wondered if the superintendent would have any input on that.
I would think all of those conversations would have to be executive session.
Thank you.
And Member Sexton?
I want to tease apart for a moment a couple of, I think, notes that are getting all jumbled up in this conversation now, the shift from SRO in particular to safety, which is an as yet actually undefined term that we're using. We have not set for ourselves what we mean by safety. Yes, physical safety is a certain part of that. Absolutely making sure that students are not needing to go to the emergency room as a result of a thing that has occurred on school grounds. That is like bare minimum. But I think we're also talking about safety emotionally, safety among peers, safety of expression and being able to learn about themselves as human beings. There are a number of different things, and I wonder, I am curious as if part of the motion as you're intending it to be having a conversation among the broader community that is defining safety, that points to an even wider array, because I also want to point out that when the school district chose not to fund a school resource officer, they did have 2 other positions that were created, one of which I don't believe still exists, but we did have a restorative practices facilitator position that was created, and we did have a community connections coordinator or community advocate. I forget exactly the title, but those positions were also intended to serve in this sort of role, and I would love to hear more about how that went, if they don't still exist, or if they do still exist, like what's going on with that. And I also just want to lay out that, you know, that was only 2 years ago that we did that, and it takes a lot longer than 2 years for those kinds of programs to have immediate impact. But I can tell you that while it does take more than 2 years for systemic impact, I am also in the school 3 days a week. I'm at Federal Street. I volunteer there. And even just me being with those kids for the couple of weeks that we've actually been in school, you know, I've got some regular kids that now come up to me, and we chat every time I'm there, like we're buds, and they can tell me things, and it provides them, like, I'm not a police officer, I've never trained in that way, but I'm still now someone that they feel close to, safe, they can trust. We talk about emotions, we help put words to the feelings they're experiencing when they're peeved off by a peer, that sort of thing. And I feel like when we're talking about safety, those kinds of interactions are ones we need to talk about as well. And I'll just wrap up real quick. As a plug, if you're in the community or you are a parent and you have even an hour or 2 in your week, come be with the kids, even if they're not your own kid. And that is part of how we keep each other safe as well. That's how we keep our kids safe.
Other discussion? Can you repeat the motion, please?
That the school committee begin a comprehensive study and deliberation process to evaluate safety needs and what solutions would work in Greenfield to address those needs.
Oh, sorry.
I did have a direct question to the maker of the motion, and I wanted to give them an opportunity to respond.
I think it would be impossible to look and see what all of the safety concerns are if you aren't opening the discussion to allow the public, the teachers, the students, to tell you what those concerns are. So I do believe there would be a public part of the discussion, though of course there would be some specifics that would have to be in executive session for legal reasons. But we do need to allow the community to give their opinions, to give their experiences. We can't shut people down, especially not on a topic that concerns their kids' safety, physical or emotional, because they're tied together.
I'm going to comment. I'm not supportive of the motion as presented. It's a very broad discussion. Safety just covers so many different things. I also feel like part of what we are running into tonight is some of the questions and challenges for us as a school committee in terms of deliberation on the topic, what items get discussed in full committee, what items get discussed in executive session. I think that it probably will take more time and thought to craft a motion that will be specific enough to really give us what our charge is as a school committee, and if we're taking this on. I guess separate from that, I do have questions about whether we should be taking this on. It seems to me that the primary reasons this has come up is because there was a disturbing and upsetting school shooting that took place in one community, and then since the last meeting there, people are reporting on an incident that happened in a school. And I'm not sure that necessarily represents that this is a strategic question that the committee should be taking up. I don't know relative to other school districts how unusual it is for physical fights to break out in schools. So in high schools, I'm assuming that's quite a common experience. So I guess one thought I have is whether we might direct Anne, if she's willing to do it, to spend the month kind of studying the question and coming up with a proposal for the committee about what that work would be and what it would look like and how it would be done. And we could evaluate whether that discussion needed to happen in an open session or an executive session. So I guess my question is whether you might consider withdrawing your motion for the moment and accepting that charge over the next month.
I would be willing to do the work, and I would be willing to withdraw the motion in order to give the time to do the work, unless I have a fellow committee member who strongly feels that we need more action sooner, in which case I would like them to have the chance to state that before I withdraw it, just to be fair for anyone else.
Anyone want to speak to that? I'm not seeing any objection.
Okay, so I will withdraw the motion and spend the next month putting together what this could look like. Community, please email me. Do my work for me. Sorry, just kidding.
Can I make a request?
Member Martini, yes?
I would just like to ask that part of that information include what other school committees have actually done in similar studies, if you can find that. And because I always want to know where does precedent lie with other school committees, and I would also appreciate some input from the Massachusetts Association of School Committees, if you wouldn't mind requesting that from, I'm not sure who would be the best person, Liz LaFond or someone else at MASC who could please advise.
I'll work my way down the contact tree until I hit the right person.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you for a wonderful and constructive conversation. We're not responding to the chat and the Zoom, unfortunately. We just aren't capable of doing that right now. We'll move on to reports of the administration, and I'm not, oh, there's Andy. Okay, Andy, can you come off mute and make your
Yes.
Andy Paquette, business manager?
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent. So you have in there, as I mentioned at the last meeting, we've got a different report that we've included for consideration and honestly recommendation going forward. But the first page of the report is the standard revolving account, gift account, and scholarship account information as of October 7th. Then the next pages are the school capital accounts that had been requested that we provide to you monthly. Then starting on after the 6th page of that first report, you have the original monthly update format that was used and we've used prior. When you scroll through,
Andy, I'm sorry to
I'll
interrupt. Could you give a little more orientation rather than saying the first, second, or third one?
Okay, sure. So the first page is the standard revolving account, gift account, scholarship account report. Do you see that? That's a standard that has the school launched athletics, all the revolving accounts at the top section. At least when I got it through the school material packet, that's how it's coming up.
Okay, and for people in the room, this is kind of what it looks like.
Yes,
It's
that's correct.
one page.
That's correct.
Okay.
Then the next pages are the capital accounts. The next page, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
We're just looking at hard copies that I don't think are the same that you're looking at. So you need to describe what's at the top of the page. So we
the
can...
top of the, sorry, okay. The top of the page has FY 07 borrowing order. It's elementary school windows.
Yep.
And then a FY 21 capital outlay order, so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And that next report is 6 pages. So those are all the capital articles that and capital expenditure budgets that were requested that we provide to you monthly.
Yep.
Then the next 14 pages are the, I'm going to say, the old way of reporting the monthly update. So the first page looks like it has the North Parish and it's the NP teaching staff, cut off, I'd say, as far as the description goes, with the total North Parish of the 1210348.
Yep, we got it.
Okay, so that is the normal report that we provide to you, and it's 13 pages, I apologize. So just for discussion purposes, this was in our recommendation based on the workshop that we did as far as potentially exploring changing the way that we look at it. I'm giving this to you as like a reference as to this is the way that we've done it. But then when you look at the next section,
Yep.
this is our recommended approach to how we would like to go forward, because if you look, this actually breaks it out by cost center, by salaries and wages, contracted services, and supplies and materials. This, in my opinion, in our opinion, is easier to digest because it's segregated by personnel and non-personnel expenses, and we've gone a little further and gone personnel and contracted services and supplies and materials.
Thank you.
So that's I'm gonna say the layout, and I guess our recommendation would be to go forward with that. This version that has the salary, wages, contracted services, and supplies and materials. So I can now, if you will, I can get into giving you the update as to financially where we stand. If you look and see, I mean, we're proceeding along. This again, I want to refer back to the workshop where the hats off to the payroll. We've got salaries encumbered. We have most of our known contractual obligations encumbered, where when you get to the bottom, you see that we have, a remaining balance of $54,268, but we've got just over $20 million fully encumbered. That's good practice. That's good practice to have our known expenses encumbered for at this point in the year. Now, the next step, as we've always talked about, and with we've just hired a replacement in the payroll to help out. We are now going through and doing, as I've said, the realigning of the personnel, because we know our grants now. Grants have been written and approved, and so we're going through and then going to be reallocating positions and realigning with all the hirings that have occurred through the summer. So this is all I'm going to say good news as to far as operationally how we are proceeding with the status of the budget and the management of it as we stand right now. And again, I always want to say I tip my hat because this is the way that Greenfield has always done it. And so with that, I can answer any questions you might have as to any of the specifics.
Member Deneve?
Hi, Andy. Thanks for coming on, doing your budget update virtually. You are a member of our admin team, right?
I would be considered as one, I guess. I would say yes. We're no different than a traditional business manager position.
So we receive written reports from our superintendent and our assistant superintendent. We receive budget lists from you. Why don't we receive a written report from you? I don't know what's happening, and I don't have any way to go back and acquaint myself with what has happened in the past, because there's nothing in written form. It's just line items. That's my first question.
I think that's not a question for Andy. I think that's a question for us as a committee. We've never directed the business manager to provide that. And so I think Andy has given to us what we have accepted in the past for budget. So we can deliberate and decide whether we want to request some type of narrative from the business manager, but.
Okay, that's totally fair. I definitely am ready to make a motion about that when the time comes. My other question is, there are some things in the warrants that I have questions about. What is MTRS filing?
MTRS filing, that is the filing, are you talking about the invoice from TMS for that?
Yeah, there's a number of invoices from TMS for MTRS filing.
Yes, that's because it was brought to the attention of the district that the MTRS filing was about 2 years in arrears prior to us getting there. And the district didn't have the personnel to do that, and we have that capacity. So that is not in our standard contract that we have with the district. So that falls under the special projects clause of our contract. So we have staff people that are helping the district get caught up with its MTRS filing.
Does it require any sort of special certification to perform MTRS filing?
Nope.
So it's a data entry position?
No, it's more than data entry. It's reconciling information, doing research on variances from what it is that would be listed as contractual and retirable earnings versus non-retirable, and making sure that what is being categorized as MTRS eligible is indeed MTRS eligible. And if there are variances, then there are research that's required as to why there would be a variance of, whether or not it's a stipend for something, and was that stipend listed in a contract and therefore eligible for MTRS or not.
I ask because it's a $141 an hour job. And so I just want to find out the details behind it so I can understand it. So I appreciate you answering those questions. I have 2 more questions.
Sure, go ahead, then we'll move to Member Goodwin.
There was some significant warrants for bills for graphic design, and I'm wondering what it was for. There is a football ad that I'm wondering if the graphic design was for that.
You're asking about the invoices from TMS?
Yeah.
So the focus of this agenda item is on the business manager report. We do have a contract with the agency that Andy happens to work with for work that is directed by the superintendent, but it is a contract that was signed off on by the school committee. So I just ask members to keep your questions focused on the report from the business manager on the business of the schools.
So how do we discuss these? Because we're expected to put our signatures to them, and I have questions because I don't feel comfortable putting a signature to warrants that are written this way.
As we've discussed many times before at these meetings, anytime a member has any question about any invoice that they're signing off on in the warrant, the superintendent is highly accessible to answer those questions, as is Andy. So I say that would be probably the place to start. If the problem rises to a level of something that affects the school district policy, budget, so on, that would be an appropriate item for the school committee.
So let me make sure I understand. So if I have a question about an invoice, I'm to ask him, but not now.
Well, it's that, right, yes, that's correct. It would be a one-on-one question, I think, because what we have before us is an agenda for the school committee, which our role on the full school committee is to set policy, to set budget, and to evaluate the superintendent. So getting into the details of invoices and what is this for and what's that for, I think would be more appropriately handled in a one-on-one question. If something came out of those questions that really became in the purview of the school committee, I think that would be appropriate.
Okay, I have to respectfully disagree with you because I am having a one-on-one conversation with him. And there are things, and this is budgetary, and there are things that are not, I think, I have questions about. So if you want me to write my questions down and call him, I mean, it wouldn't be any different than this, but I'll respect that, but I disagree with it. But
Andrew
as
just
the-
happens to work for a vendor that the school committee has a contract with to provide services to. So the questions about graphic design are really not related to the agenda item that we're discussing right now, which is the business manager's report. It's not a report of the contractor, it's a report of him in his role as business manager on the business of the schools.
Okay.
Any other questions relevant to that? I'm not hearing any. And Member Goodwin.
So I just attended chartering the course on Saturday, so this is very much in my head. And one of the statements that I took to my heart was, we are responsible for approving warrants, and if we have questions, we should get questions answered because it's our job for oversight of this. I just feel like every time I see warrants, they've already been approved, but my name is on things I have questions about. So I guess I'm trying to figure out, if we're not having conversations here, the next month is going to come, they're going to get signed, and these are things that keep showing up every month. They're not something that just shows up once. So I guess I'm trying to put transparency in my questions, and I am not comfortable with my name on some of these warrants. And so I'm being told I'm legally, when somebody, you're all signing my name when you sign. So that is making me uncomfortable. So
I think this is a topic for recommendations for future agenda items, so I would suggest that we bring it up then, and we can discuss those concerns at that time. I'm just conscious also of wanting to respect open meeting law, and what we did was create an agenda and told people what we're going to be discussing, and we are moving into discussions that the public hasn't had a chance to be made aware of. For example, our policies and procedures around warrants and such. So, yep, Member Sexton.
I had a question about the Federal Street elevator and just where that process is at. Speaking of school safety, I don't want our cafeteria workers to have to keep carting the milk upstairs.
The RFQ, or I should say the RFP, has been turned over to the interim CPO on the city side, and he's reviewing for publishing. He understands the urgency of getting that done.
Thanks.
Any other questions on the report of the business manager? Okay, let's see, agenda, I guess we're moving on to Assistant Superintendent.
Good evening. I'm going to just try to share my screen in the Zoom. I think I am. Okay, thank you for your patience. So in terms of my report, the report I submitted, I'll take in reverse order because I listed the recruitment second and the accountability first, but we're going to talk a little bit more about the accountability. Just wanted to notify the committee that I attended Mass Hire's Fall Multi-Industry Job Fair last Thursday at Hampshire Mall in an effort to fill vacant positions. It was a good opportunity to engage in prospective candidates. We had generated some interest from everything from custodial positions that are open to IAs, lots of questions. So certainly checking in with principals about names that we collected there. Mass Hire does a good job of opening it up and getting a wide variety of industries to these job fairs, and they're planning another one in early November at Greenfield Community College. So my hope is that it is in our backyard. That might generate some other interest if all our positions aren't full by then. In terms of district accountability, I just have, it really is at a glance. I think the data that comes out from DESE in terms of accountability, you can go to pretty significant depths. This presentation does not do that, but I am certainly happy to have the conversation. I think it's important, it was an important opportunity to preview the accountability findings to the committee. Ultimately, these are the ratings that determine what supports or interventions a district or a school may require from DESE, or you know, on the other end, schools of recognition, also through the accountability. We touched on this a little bit last month when we talked about NEASC, but I think this is a pretty comprehensive report that DESE does, and the information, the data was just released publicly about 2.5 weeks ago. So I'll go through the presentation, happy to answer questions. There's a lot of information, but I do admit it is scratching the surface, but I figured it was a good place to start. So in terms of the accountability system itself, it's bringing together a number of measures in order, or in an effort to provide clear and actionable information to districts and schools about performance in a number of areas. And not just those areas, but how are your subgroups, how are all students doing in those areas? And it really breaks down those details to the granular level. Ultimately, the accountability results answer 2 questions. How is the school or district doing, and what kind of supports does that school or district need? In terms of our relationship with the accountability system, in terms of our strategic plan, this is a brief, I would say, crosswalk. I think the development of the strategic plan clearly had some of these data points in mind, because it touches on a number of issues from in-curriculum instruction, instructional supports, and communications and outreach. I think if pushed, I could have connected the operations portion of it as well, but you know, I do think it is well aligned with our strategic plan and the work that we're trying to do. Here I listed some resources. This image on the left, while it's probably not visible to many people right now, this is at the bottom of every schools, and I'll click on our accountability report right now. If you scroll to the bottom here, it is really just a glossary of details about what that report says, what it does. I also included links to the interpretive materials and the glossary of accountability terms, just for reference points. If you look through at the top here, this is where you can see our overall results. You can get into student group results. Oops, excuse me. Right, so as you scroll down here, this is high need students, but you can go into any one of these indicators and get a more in-depth look. I will make note that there are a number of subgroup populations that we might not have data for, because we're not hitting typically DESE is using 20 as the number before you get a rating on it. So there are some subgroups that we wouldn't have data on. I'm sorry. This is the district, yes. This is the district. You can go to this far right tab, and this goes into the schools, and then you can click on any one of the schools to get that more in-depth look at each of our schools. I have a lot more on my screen that I'm trying to maneuver around to avoid the zoom. Back to my presentation. This link here will just take you to DESE's District and School Accountability webpage, right? So again, more information about how in-depth this data can get, and then the glossary of accountability terms I included here as well. So this is a snapshot. This takes a look, this is our accountability percentiles, essentially looking at all the information in the indicators of the school's overall performance relative to other schools, other like schools, I should say, similar grades. It's not perfect match, but they do take, and as you get into those data reports, you'll see high school versus non-high school, even in a place like Greenfield High School right now, because 8th grade lives there, you get non-high school ratings because of that one grade being there. So in 2023, there is, right, some good news, and there's some data that's probably hard to look at, but you know, we had 4 schools requiring assistance or intervention in the accountability system. In 1 year, the district went from 4 schools to 2 schools requiring or needing intervention. Again, looking at just the pure numbers, people might say, like, where can we do better? How can we improve here? And those are the questions we're asking ourselves. But I also think it's important to stop and recognize the growth that has been made. There's some pretty significant growth on this sheet in one school year. And sometimes that's about a curriculum that's been implemented, or that's about a group of students. Again, this is school-wide though, so it's typically not about one grade. Sometimes you'll see it, one grade makes a jump, and as you dig into that, it could beg some more questions. You might ask also, what does this mean for our statewide system of support work with our SSOS friends? They will remain in Greenfield. If people remember back to when schools were rated as a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they've shifted things a little bit, but the ratings still do mean that you essentially go by the lowest rated school in any given district. So as long as there is one school requiring assistance or intervention, I anticipate SSOS would be here. Our meeting tonight is preceding a meeting with SSOS this week that we're going to dig into this a little bit more with that team and get feedback from them about what they're seeing with it as well. So again, this is because of the timing, I want to make sure we shared something, but we'll continue to get more in depth in this data moving forward. So some highlights, a 10% increase. If you go back to that main page, you get rated based on, are you making progress towards your targets? Your targets are assigned based on how you did in the previous year, really the previous 2 years. In 2023, Greenfield made moderate progress, exceeded or met 43% of their targets. Last year, it's 53% substantial progress, but I want to be clear, when they give you that rating of 53, that's 2 years of data. So again, year 1 in 2023, it was this year, we made 61% towards targets, either meeting or exceeding targets last year. The district hit 61% of their targets. So it's, again, these are things that we should be highlighting, right? Celebrating those, taking the small wins while recognizing there's work to be done. We met or exceeded targets in all of these categories here. And here I tried to go through and say where it was all students, our lowest performing students, non-high school grades, just to give a little bit of context. These bottom 2, just want to note, these are focused subgroups in the district this school year, but English learners and former English learners in our non-high school grades met or exceeded 68% of their targets last year. So it's that focus, right, comes from a place where we looked at the data, but clearly some of that focus started well before last year, and the instructional prioritization plan got put into effect, and that shows here. And same with Hispanic Latino non-high school students, met or exceeded 68% of targets. And it is not the same group, to be very clear. It's not just because Hispanic, Latino, and English learners. It is 2 different groups, just happen to meet the same number of targets. Areas in need of improvement. So just again, when you get into the data page, you'll start to see we got 0 points. It's basically a 0 through 4 rating. This is what those numbers mean. 0 means we declined, 4 means you exceeded the target, and then there's the 1, 2s, and 3s are no change or low growth. That's when you look at the student growth percentile. Improved below your target, so some improvement, but maybe not significant, and then you met your target is a 3. So you'll see chronic absenteeism, another focus area in the district in the instructional prioritization plan. All students and our lowest performing students, 0 out of 4. And again, those next 3 are all 0 to 4, and just, again, highlight's not the right word, but I did say that 0 means that those chronic absenteeism did increase in those groups from 23 to 24. Students with disabilities, student subgroup in our non-high school grades only met or exceeded 7% of their targets. So I think one thing that the superintendent and I have talked about, and we've talked about with our leadership team, is part of the reason that we have some of these focus groups is not all students are having the same experience in the Greenfield Public Schools. And I think some shifts need to be considered to make that happen. And some shifts are small, some shifts might be bigger. Advanced coursework is only a high school rating, and it only considers 11th and 12th grade students. So if we have students who are taking AP courses in 9th or 10th grade or taking dual enrollment courses, those students aren't hitting this target because they're not in the measurement. And then 4-year graduation rate, we declined, and then extended engagement rate. That just means essentially if you didn't graduate in 4 years, you persisted, you remained connected to the schools. So the work ahead is continue to follow the strategic plan. I think, like I said at the beginning, it's well aligned, as is the instructional prioritization plan developed in collaboration with the SSOS team. All students with a specific focus on students with disabilities, English learners, and our Hispanic Latino subgroups. High quality, grade level, culturally responsive practices that are rooted in best practices for literacy, professional development with partners through Teaching Lab, both for educators and for district and school leaders, not just in the classroom. And then a focus on attendance, really promoting the benefits of good attendance, stronger communication. Schools are having weekly attendance meetings, and then trying to build in those wraparound supports where possible. So I'm one that likes to focus on the highlights because I think there's a lot to highlight, and it's a credit to the administration, the teachers, the counselors, the instructional assistants over the past few years to really dive into this work. So kudos to all of them, and then certainly recognize there's still work to be done, but my hope is that we can continue that momentum. So happy to answer some questions, and I know, again, even though this is at a glance, there is a lot to digest.
Questions for Mr. Sullivan? Yep.
We have a new language in our district. Have we found ELL people to help our Haitian population?
So we have resources to support that population, but the SCI, the Sheltered English, and the endorsement is not about Spanish or English. It's about good practices in language development. So I think we're trying to focus on those, especially with our earliest learners. And I know as students get older, some of that becomes more challenging, but we have our L teachers, and I think sometimes students acclimate a little bit better, sometimes than parents and families. So the language bridge that we now have available, I think is helping with some of those communication efforts.
Other questions? Oh, Member Neve.
I have a question. One of the wonderful highlights that Karen used to give us when she was assistant superintendent was information about all the grants that she was writing. And so I was just curious if you are also doing that work, and if so, are there any new ones that you're excited for, or any that are on your target list for the future?
Yeah, I think the one, I think we announced it 2 meetings ago. Maybe it was August. The Innovation Career Pathway work. I think that's one that that team met actually yesterday, and there's some excitement around that and building out what pathways could look like for our students. And you know, some of the founding principles or tenets around that is about equitable access, removing barriers for students so that they have access to advanced coursework and those types of things. So I think those types of opportunities start to marry some of the things that we're seeing here that might be challenges and open it up to more students or a more diverse subset of students. That's just one. There's certainly others. I know we're working on an SEL grant right now, but I can certainly add some more information to future reports. I know we wrote one for the career counseling at the high school as well that we're waiting to hear back on, so happy to include some more information on that.
Other questions or comments? I have a question about the accountability percentiles slide. What are the factors that go into these numbers? I was wondering if it's, well, I guess that's just the question. I was wondering if there's more kind of process data that goes into it versus just outcomes, or is it purely an outcome-based metric?
Pretty outcome-based.
Okay.
Look at the screen here. I'll just go through. I'm going to go through high school just because I think that's what I'm most familiar with, and there's actually more ratings there. So in terms of achievement, this is where it gets into MCAS. So here, and you'll see that this carries a weight of 47.5%. So you're going to get that total here, and then growth is that student growth percentile. So how are students growing on MCAS based on like peers? That gets that 22.5. These 3 categories are only in the high school ratings. So you'll see over here it's 60 and 20 because they don't have the graduation rate, extended engagement, and the dropout rate. So for the high school, you get another 20% there.
Oh, Stephen, can you please turn on your microphone?
Sorry, I can repeat that if need be. So for the high school, everything's weighted. The achievement's at this 47.5%. The growth is 22.5%. You have 20% of high school completion, and then 10% of your score is based on chronic absenteeism, and at the high school level, the advanced coursework to get your 100%. For non-high school, they're weighted a little bit differently because you don't have the factors like advanced coursework, graduation rate, extended engagement.
Okay, I see. So essentially, like, if you just looked strictly at MCAS numbers, you wouldn't see as deep a picture as you do here because it measures other factors besides just grades, I guess.
Absolutely, yes. And right, achievement and growth are very much based on MCAS results. The other factors involve a lot more information.
Thank you.
Of course. And then, not that you asked, but down here it kind of goes through how you weight high school versus non-high school, and the total percentage of the points. So.
Thank you. All right. Thank you for your report.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Oh, question, sorry, Member Martini, yes, and then I see Member Deneve.
Okay. So I wanted to know if, could you please elaborate on what specifically is going into that frankly dismal score for students with disabilities in the district? And what is being planned in terms of immediate and longer term next steps for them? I know I'm asking for something that probably could be its own presentation, and I would be very happy to have one of those, specifically in regards to students with disabilities and special education at a near future meeting.
Of course. So I did call it up here on the screen. So it is all the same factors. I did double check on the high school. They did not have the number to qualify, so they didn't have that number 20. So you don't get the weight for that subgroup. So just so everyone's on the same page, this is all really grades 1 through 7, 3 through 7. Because of MCAS. So it is all the same factors, from chronic absenteeism to the student growth percentile to achievement on MCAS. So because it's non-high school, it is a bit more limiting, but those are the factors that come into it. And then I'll just show you all so you can see it. If you go into the detailed indicator for each, you can go in here, it's going to tell you English language arts achievement for non-high school, and then you can see students with disabilities. And part of the reason the target was this 468.7.
Member Deneve.
We are scheduled for a 5-minute break at 8 p.m. and it's 8:20.
Yeah, the top of the meeting says, should the meeting extend beyond 8 p.m., a 5-minute break for members will be observed. It doesn't say it will be observed at 8 p.m., but it does say there will be a 5-minute break. So thank you. Any other discussion, questions for the Assistant Superintendent? All right, great. Let us take a 5-minute break. Folks on Zoom still hear us? Let us know if not.
I can hear you.
Okay. Superintendent report.
Thank you. We were talking about some of our subgroups and our ELL population being one of them, but we do have some highlighted good news today. The access scores that we just received for our L students, our middle school had tremendous growth. 56% of our L students increased toward their learning goals in grades 6 through 8. So I wanted to share that. But it was so remarkable that the DESE Office of Language Acquisition actually asked our administration, along with our ELL teacher from the middle school, to present today to a conference on a webinar about what we are doing for our L population and how it's actually showing some positive growth for our students. So I wanted to share. You'll notice in the reports that we share now, though, we are continually linking any of these items to our strategic plan work so that you can distinctly see what we're doing and how it's really supporting the 5-year plan that we have in place. And not just the topic, but I've tried to also put in parentheses a little extra info about what part of that topic they were supporting. So you'll see that in blue moving forward in my reports. Some staffing updates. Our Director of Technology, John Grimaldi, is leaving us on Friday for some personal reasons, and we do wish him a fond farewell. We have had a great response, though, for the posting, and we've interviewed numerous qualified candidates, and we have 2 more on Friday that we will be interviewing, so hopefully we will have a replacement fairly quickly in that department. Member Sexton asked earlier, we used to have, it was one position, it was the Combined Community Connections / Social Justice Coordinator. I don't remember the whole title, but it was ESER 2 funded, and when ESER 2 ended, the position ended, but prior to ESER 2 ending, the personnel person departed from Greenfield, and we just never found a replacement. For the past year, we had a director of behavior services who took on a lot of that work, and then that person retired. So we have had the director of behavior services position in our general budget. It has been open, and we have finally filled it. We hired Katie Miller-Murphy. She started with us on Monday, hit the ground running. I'm really glad to have her on board because she'll be doing a lot of the oversight of not only our attendance meetings in all of our buildings, but working with our counselors, our BCBAs. We also have RBTs that we will be putting at our elementary schools to help monitor and really help with some of the behaviors that they're seeing that are challenging at that level. They will be working together also to talk about restorative practices. We've been working closely with FERCOG and how to roll out a solid 0 to 5 plan, as I call it, because we do need to pilot and to think about the planning process. I think everyone thinks you can just be restorative practice communities and don't understand really the investment that you have to put in place. And if you don't do it with purpose and intent, it falls to pieces. So we will be working with them closely, and we have 2 counselors at the high school that are trained through Boston. We sent them to Suffolk University 2 years ago, and they are very interested in continuing this work. So I do really want to remind, though, that with regards to behaviors in schools, we have tried to really support the social and emotional needs of our students. And at the same time, we were in a Rethinking Discipline initiative, as Member Martini previously stated, and we finally have been grown out of that, as they say, and we no longer under that umbrella with DESE. But many of folks don't understand that DESE also changed the regulations around suspension, and they are requiring schools provide alternative measures. And you have to document these alternative measures and the success or non-success of those alternative measures, and then actually move to a suspension. So what folks think can happen with regards to removing students from school really is not as easily possible as in many years ago. Some of those alternative measures include, parent meetings, lessons with counselors on their behaviors, safety plans, after-school detentions, but you really do have to monitor and document all of that. So I just wanted to share that because having someone like the Director of Behavioral Services is pivotal in actually meeting those requirements under DESE regs. I also want to remind folks that I, along with the rest of all members of our school district, are obligated to follow FERPA, and we have to keep the privacy of student information and protect that privacy for all students under all circumstances. So that also often puts a snafu in what people think we can speak about and not speak about. So I just really want to just remind folks of that. We also had a first grade opening at Newton Elementary, and I really am excited that we will be welcoming a new teacher. Danielle Italiano is coming to us with teaching experience in Holyoke and Amherst. She will be starting in about a week and a half at Newton, and really want to thank Stacy McDonough, the IA at Newton, who's been covering the classroom, working with the other first grade teacher and teaching lessons for us, Rockstar IA, and we really appreciate her support and patience during this time and look forward to having a first grade teacher on board. Many other staff have been welcomed, but we are still struggling, as Stephen alluded to earlier, to fill some IA positions, some custodial positions. We certainly are doing as much outreach as possible. There will be another recorder ad in the paper, so there will be another marketing invoice for that, because sometimes the best bang for our buck is local people who read the paper and maybe not beyond school spring. So we're hoping that that will garner some interest. And I just also want to restate Member Sexton's shout out to the community that if you even have an hour and want to come cover lunch or recess, we would love to have you sign up as a volunteer and get you onboarded so that you could help us in those areas. And we appreciate your efforts at Federal Street. I know Principal Halpin loves having you. A lot of the work that we're doing with instructional strategies is also tied to district learning walks. We have some formal learning walks that are happening with our professional development teaching lab partner. We are using this with a focus on literacy this year. So in all classrooms, we will be looking at the engagement of students, student discourse, students' ability not to opt out and engage in the lesson, and how they are accessing grade level standards. But 6 walkthroughs a year for Stephen and I just isn't acceptable. So he and I have begun our own site visit walkthroughs. So one week I'm at middle and high, he's at elementary and AEL, and then we flip, and we're using components of the same rubric that we have been using with the teaching lab. We've done it on a smaller scale so that we can also be in classrooms more often. I linked the strategic plan there, but for us, really monitoring how we are collecting student data, what we're doing to look at student data, and how folks in classrooms know what students need is our priority. And then I had mentioned earlier that we have been randomly, and I put air quotes, randomly selected by DESE for a full comprehensive DESE district site review. We met with the research team. It's called the American Institute for Research, who does all of DESE's work on site and comes to visit. We had our introductory call. We've gotten signed up for the portal in which we have to produce pounds of information. And then they will collect data, they will be on site, and they say they will analyze and integrate the information they collect to provide a snapshot of what the district looks like, and then push out a final report 3 to 4 months after that. I just remind folks, though, because they are coming the week of November 18th, and part of that is going to be interviews with school committee members, interviews with the mayor, interviews with parents and families. So we have some form letters that they've provided us, and we will be pushing out more information so that folks know where to sign up if they want to be part of these groups. And I will also be sharing information with all of you if you want to be one that they interview. They will also be in our classrooms, in our buildings, and they will be meeting with all administrators, our Director of Pupil Services, and we will continue to schedule all of that as I get more information each week. Just an added update, because the mayor had asked for updated enrollment statistics, and I had given those overall ones each month. We are at 1376, which is about 30 student less than we were as of September 9th. I do caution, though, we have a ever-changing ebb and flow with our migrant families who are at the hotel. Many of them have secured housing in Deerfield at Cliffside and are slowly moving out, but we are slowly moving other folks in, so the enrollment fluctuation is constant. I did attend a Franklin County Superintendent's meeting today, and there were 6 other schools, and 5 out of the 6 also said their enrollment was down about 30 kids. So we all thought that that was odd and interesting all at the same time. So for us, it really does seem to be a constant moving target with some of the transiency. So, and that is my report, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Questions for the superintendent? Not seeing any. Thank you very much. Oh, yes.
I'm sorry, I wasn't quick on the raising hand part, pardon me. And Karen, this would be fine later, not tonight, but just by school at some point. And thank you so much for doing that. I appreciate you.
I have if you want to jot down the numbers, I did bring the numbers by school.
Okay, great. I'm writing.
All right. AEL, 87. Federal Street, 195.
Yep.
Discovery School, 186. Newton, 175.
Okay.
Middle School, 325. High School, 407.
Thanks a lot. Thank you so much.
I can send that in an email too if you needed it.
Nope, I wrote it down. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Other questions for the superintendent? I just really appreciate your follow through in terms of organizing your report with those connections to our strategic plan. I think that's both valuable in the month and also will be valuable to us, as we're looking at evaluation of you and, how well you're responding to the things that we've asked you to do. So I really appreciate that. Okay. Now we move on to the consent agenda. Are there any items any school committee member would like to consider separately? Member Childs?
I would like to consider the school catchment separately and pull that out of the consent agenda.
Okay. It is number F, approve the catchment street school assignment list for 2025-26. Any other items that folks would like to? Okay, so I'd like to hear a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented with the exception of item F.
So moved.
Motion from Member Deneve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Member Childs. I heard first. Any discussion? Member Deneve, would you please call the vote by roll call?
Secretary Geneve, I'm a yes. Vice Chair Martini?
Yes.
Chair Johnson-Musad?
Yes?
Mayor DeSorger?
Yes.
Member Goodwin?
Yes.
Member Sexton?
Yes.
Member Childs?
Yes.
It's unanimous.
Okay. Then we'll start with a motion to approve the Catchment Street School assignment list for 2025-26.
So moved.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion.
I just wanted to give the superintendent a chance to provide a little bit more context on this, especially for the public, because they're not really going to know it. So the big question is, where do these numbers come from? How was the decision made?
Sure. The catchment list that you have was actually the draft of the street assignments that began the redistricting process years ago. And the bus company, the former superintendent, and the principals of the elementary at the time had to decide on availability of classrooms in the building in order for fifth grade to move back down, because you have to have space for those students to be in rooms. And while I appreciate some of the concerns around some of the other streets that may be close to Oak Courts not making it in the new catchment list, the quick glance that I did look at, without getting too into the weeds, it was about 32 additional students that would have to move to Federal Street. So that alone, just at a K through 4 run, would put us probably in a situation with needing a potential extra bus, or it would put Federal Street in potential for needing 3 sections of a grade level just by adding the numbers. And I didn't go deep into the weeds to see, what grade levels or how we would manipulate all of that. But then after communications with the transportation company, as well as elementary principals before our last redistricting ad hoc meeting, we talked about the catchment areas and the numbers, and can hopefully follow through and have all of the fifth grades be 2 sections in each building moving forward, with the exception of a potential 3rd section needed in a school. But we've been looking at space and trying to configure that. I also, later in the agenda, there is a timeline just that came out of that ad hoc redistricting meeting. And time is of the essence, which is why we had talked about needing this assigned list to actually be voted on and approved, because then the communications with families that are affected by the list actually have to begin sooner rather than later, because the policy says that they can choose to age out, or they can choose to go to their new home school. And we would need to communicate with families on when their choice needed to be made and why, in order to secure transportation and have space available in the buildings. I had originally had it on for our November meeting, and thankfully Member Childs and Member Sexton were like, we should do this sooner rather than later, so we moved it to October. And I think once we actually get this solidified, a lot of the next steps can happen.
Other questions or comments?
I just want to clarify. So families can opt out of this?
Only in the highlighted streets. So those that affected here, if your homes, right now their home school is where they go to school.
Right.
Next year, their home school will be different.
Right.
So in our discussions, we gave families the option. If you're a 3rd grader at Federal Street, but your school has changed, you want to probably spend 4th and 5th grade at Federal Street. It's the school your family's known and love, but maybe you don't. Maybe you want your family to move to the new home school for ease of transportation, pickup, drop-off, busing. We are still providing transportation regardless of their decision for the families that are affected. And that's why it's key to really be certain about which highlighted streets we're agreeing upon, so that, and I saw your shake of the head, Member Goodwin, so yes, it is a lot, but we are going to do this. Yes, we are.
Any other discussion? All right, Member Deneve, would you call a vote? You're on, thanks.
Secretary Geneve, I'm yes. Vice Chair Martini?
Yes.
Chair Johnson Masad? Mayor DeSorger?
Yes.
Member Goodwin?
Yes.
Member Sexton?
Yes.
Member Childs?
Yes.
Passes unanimously.
Thanks, everybody. So you might notice that our school committee reports item on our agenda looks a little different than it has in the past. This is because on Monday we received notice from the clerk's office that they would like us to have specific items under each subcommittee so that the public can reasonably know what will be discussed. So in the future, I think if your committee wants to report at the meeting, please email me a week before so we can make sure to get the items you'll be discussing into the agenda. So with that, Budget and Finance Subcommittee, Member Martini.
Okay. Yes. Hello. So, Budget and Finance did meet in September, and we covered several topics, including the dissemination of the school committee's new budget development calendar for FY26, as well as implementation of school committee policy DBD, which is in part about public engagement in the budget development process, as well as upcoming capital improvements necessary and a brief presentation from Andy regarding our FY24 end of year accounting. So, as you know, the school committee recently approved our first annual budget development calendar. And our next step in carrying out our policies in this area is for the committee to determine how we gather input in the budget development process. So just to make it easy for everyone, our policy DBD states the first priority in the development of an annual budget will be the educational welfare of the children in our schools. However, the district will also attempt to balance the valid interests of the taxpayers. Budget decisions reflect the attitude and philosophy of those charged with the responsibility for educational decision-making. Therefore, a sound budget development process must be established to ensure that the annual operating budget accurately reflects the school district's goals and objectives. In the budget planning process for the school district, the school committee will strive to, 1, engage in thorough advanced planning with staff and community involvement in order to develop budgets and guide expenditures in a manner that will achieve the greatest educational returns and contributions to the educational program in relation to dollars expended. 2, establish levels of funding that will provide high-quality education for all our students. 3, use the best available techniques for budget development and management. The superintendent will have overall responsibility for budget preparation, including the construction of and adherence to a budget calendar. So, with that policy in mind, we reviewed the ways in which the committee in which the community already has opportunities for involvement in our budget development process, which are also laid out within our annual budget development calendar that we just put out there for everyone. And those ways include emailing the superintendent via our staff directory, emailing the school committee, making public comment at a school committee meeting, especially at pertinent times, which are outlined for people in the budget development calendar, such as September and October about capital improvements, during November and December about the development of the next year's operating budget, and during February and early March about the proposed operating budget. And also, if folks have an interest in a certain department within the school, then they may contact the school principal or the department head for that department through the staff directory to let them know their ideas, especially when individual department budget proposals are under development in the fall for the next year's operating budget. Participating in school councils is a great way to do this, and people can check the district calendar for upcoming meetings of the council for each school. Those being the existing ways that we could identify that the public already has opportunities for engagement in the budget development. We then discussed whether these means are adequate, and we agreed that we would like to make ourselves more available in order to provide more opportunities for engagement. So toward that end, we discussed several options and created a proposal, which I have made into a motion for approval as follows. I move that the committee approve the Budget and Finance Subcommittee plan for implementation of policy DBD Section 1 for FY26 budget development as follows. Each subcommittee member will attend at least one meeting of a parent organization, PTO, CPAC, LPAC, or school council prior to the December school committee meeting for the purpose of making themselves available, in addition to normal means, for public input in the budget development process for FY26. Would anyone like to second that motion?
I'd second that.
Thank you. Discussion? Sorry, I should leave that to the chair.
I have a question / possible friendly amendment. Do you mean each member of the Budget and Finance Subcommittee?
Yes, each subcommittee member,
Okay,
Budget and Finance Subcommittee member.
okay, great. If we can include that in the motion, that would be great.
Okay.
Any other discussion? We have a question from Susan Farber.
I'm hoping that you would email that motion.
Yes, I would be happy to do that. Sorry, it was kind of long.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Any other discussion? Member Sexton?
Okay, go ahead.
I'm assuming this will be part of how this gets implemented, but I also want to be sure that that there's proper notice given of those dates that you will be attending those meetings so that people know to go to them.
Yes, so we will definitely incorporate that, make sure it gets out there. We discussed in the Budget and Finance Subcommittee meeting means of disseminating our annual budget calendar. And I imagine we can use those same means to notify folks of which meetings either Member Childs or Member Geneve or myself will be at for folks.
Member Deneve?
I have the calendar of those parent meetings sent to me by Karen, so I'm going to be adding them to our school committee calendar. So if you would like to attend one, even if you're not on the Budget and Finance Subcommittee, you can go and represent. And that will be up next week, no later than next week, I promise.
Thank you so much for doing that. The subcommittee members are committed to doing at least one. We are only humans and are extremely busy in our own personal lives. So we decided to commit to one. But we don't want to necessarily make that something on the plate of other members as well. We take our responsibility on budget and finance seriously. So if other members would like to voluntarily go and make themselves present, then by all means.
Mayor DeSorger.
Thank you so much for all your work on this. This is wonderful. Would you like me to send to you before you get started too much what guidelines that I'd be sending to like the city on looking over the entire budget, or
Yeah, yes, please. I would be very interested in that information. I would just like to be clear that the purpose of us going and making ourselves available in this way is to listen and gather input from people, and not, necessarily to deliberate. We will do that in our open meetings.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Any other comments or questions? I'll just say it's really wonderful. It's a great model, I think, to both put the work into developing this calendar and then get right to work figuring out how to engage the public in the process. And I like your realistic approach of one meeting per member and kind of focusing on what we can do and not overstretching ourselves. I think that's great. Shall we vote? Member Deneve?
Secretary Deneve, yes. Vice Chair Martini?
Yes.
Chair Johnson-Musan?
Yes.
Mayor DeSorger?
Yes.
Member Goodwin?
Yes.
Member Sexton?
Yes.
Member Childs?
Yes.
Vote is unanimous.
Thank you so much for that. I really am heartened to see and be involved in budget development becoming a more organized and engaged process here. So thank you. The second thing that we also discussed is current capital improvement needs, the most pressing of which include upgrading the GMS fire panel and making improvements to the fourth grade wing and nurse's office at Four Corners that are required under the ADA in resolution of a previous complaint. The Four Corners improvements still require additional information, though, in order to provide an estimated cost. So I will be offering a motion tonight only for the fire panel, and we will discuss an additional request for the ADA improvements on another date once we have that information. We also discussed additional capital improvements that are needed but less urgent, including a GMS awning roof replacement by the gym doors, GHS lighting control system updates, GHS track maintenance and painting, and AEL exterior painting. Because because we already have a significant amount in urgent capital improvement requests, and because these other items are needed, but it would be acceptable if they were funded later, we determined that they would be suitable for earmark funding requests. And to that end, I will have a separate motion for them. So before I get on to motions, though, I will let the superintendent please describe those needs in brief for the committee, if you could.
Sure. With the capital request, with the GMS fire panel, our facilities director has a meeting set up with Chief Strahan as well to go over. There is some outdated parts that are no longer available. So when you replace a fire panel, you have to also replace all of the detectors in every room, which obviously you need so that you can have the panel in working functional order. So that was really important to us to put that at the highlight of our list this year. The ADA compliance issues at Discovery School, I think for those of you that have been on the committee for a while realize that this is a OCR complaint that I believe is at least a decade old, if not longer. And the last two items on the list are the nurse's office and the door accessibility that needs to be widened for wheelchair accessibility, as well as the fourth grade wing is only stair access to exit. So there does need to be an ADA compliant exit outside that of the building. We did have the facilities director meet a contractor to see if there could be some estimates and quotes when this originally was on tap. And then after that, we also met with the building inspector. And after that conversation, it looks like there may need to be an architect and some future planning. So there is much more deep dive needed into actually what it's going to take to fix both of those. So what we originally thought probably was a little bit too low in the estimation process. So I put TBD back on there and spoke with Member Martini just so that she was aware of where we were in that process for capital. With regards to earmark, talked to our legislators, talked to Member Deneve over the past year about having projects on a list readily available just in case, and you never know when they could find some money. So in speaking with the facilities director, we had come up with a list and prioritized these for really if they can wait, as Member Martini indicated, but if someone did find money and wanted to give it to Greenfield so that we could get these projects done, we would happily accept it for these items.
Thank you. Okay, so with that information in mind, I move that the committee approve an FY26 capital improvement request in the amount of $150,000 for upgrading the fire panel at Greenfield Middle School.
I'll second that.
Okay, discussion? Member Deneve, will you call a vote?
Secretary Geneve, I'm a yes. Vice Chair Martini?
Yes.
Chair Johnson Musad?
Yes.
Mayor DeSorger?
Yes.
Member Goodwin?
Yes.
Member Sexton?
Yes.
Member Childs?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, thank you. And lastly, I have one more motion. I move that the committee authorize our legislative representative to communicate with our legislative delegation to advance earmark funding requests as follows. $30,000 for GMS awning roof replacement, $50,000 for GHS lighting system updates, $50,000 for GHS track maintenance and painting, and $30,000 for AEL exterior painting.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second.
Second from Member Childs. Discussion? Member Deneve? And then the mayor.
I just want to say that I've never done this before, so this is my homework. I'm excited that we're going to try it, but this is a try and see. So if anyone has ideas or wants to work with me on this homework or happens to interact with any of the legislators and has thoughts and ideas, I would welcome them. We did talk to several people at the Day on the Hill about how to do this and got a little bit of a roadmap, but it's kind of something that it seems that once you start it, you get an idea for how to do it and you learn how to put pressure at the right times. And so that's what I'm going to try. And I will ask for help in Hyannis also of the people who do this regularly, because this is something that happens all the time for other people. So let's have it happen for us.
Thanks for taking it on, and I think you'll find that we're lucky to have our legislative delegation will actually help you talk. You can ask them, what should I be doing if I want to advocate for this, and they will tell you. So thank you so much for taking it on. Other comments or questions? Okay. Mayor, please, sorry.
Get my hand up. I'm working off my iPad tonight. I apologize not getting my hand up. First of all, Member Martini, thank you so much for doing that. I know it's a long night tonight, but could you send that to my Ginny.Desorger one tonight?
Yes.
You're not too tired?
Absolutely.
Tonight. I am meeting tomorrow with the delegation, and I'm getting better and better at this as weeks go by. Asking for specific money, and if you had an idea of which you would like the most, I will push for that, because they've actually been great. And I know that the superintendent and the assistant superintendent, that you're doing that also, but I just thought I have a meeting tomorrow so I could put in a plug if you let me know dollar amounts and your 1, 2, 3, 4s of those. And thank you again so much.
Okay. I will certainly send you that by email. And Member Geneve, I was going to suggest that the mayor has some experience now with the process around earmark funding and communicating with legislators on this. So I imagine that the two of you would make a good team on that front.
I'd be honored to work with any of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion, comments, questions? All right, Member Deneve, will you call the vote?
All right, once again, Secretary Geneve, yes. Vice Chair Martini?
Yes.
Chair Johnson Musad?
Yes.
Mayor DeSorger?
Yes.
Member Goodwin?
Yes.
Member Sexton?
Yes.
Member Childs?
Yes.
And it's unanimous.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, moving on, we have the Indigenous Regalia Review. We have it in 2 places on the agenda, so we'll just discuss that under the new business item. I'll just also mention that we did not have an executive subcommittee, so no report from that from me. So moving on to the Community Engagement Subcommittee, any topics not reasonably anticipated by the chairperson?
Nope, just that I've got an email out to schedule our first meeting.
Nice. Great. Redistricting and Reorganizing Ad Hoc Committee?
I believe that the substantive work of that committee has already been discussed tonight. Would encourage members of the public to look at the timeline that our superintendent created for what the next steps in the process are.
Thank you. School Committee Handbook.
We have a draft in your materials. It is just the final draft. There are some things that need to be filled in, just little things like email addresses and some formatting. And there's a few small bodies of text that Member Sexton is going to insert, but there will be nothing new added to this. So if you've looked through it, that's it. Anything that's going to be filled in has been identified. The only thing that will change is it will be formatted nicely, and all of the fonts will be one font. It will look nice, and it will also have a similar theme to Vice Chair Martini's budget calendar. So we will have some Green Wave logo, some Green Wave nice design, and hopefully when you look at it online, it will be cohesive and beautiful. But the time for letting us know if you want to add something at this moment has passed. But in the handbook, you'll see that there's an annual review section. So when we do our school committee self-evaluation, we will also review this. And then if anybody has anything they want to add or any new things they have learned that should be added to the handbook, then we can do that.
Great. So I'd hear a motion to approve the school committee member and community resource handbook as presented, understanding that some details and formatting may change.
I will make that motion.
All right. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Member Martini. Discussion. Member Sexton.
Just one real quick, when you read off the title of it in the statement of the motion, you said member and community resource. I think I'm remembering that when we originally brought this topic up, we sort of separated those two and said that this was really for members and is relevant to them. And so I just want to be clear on what it is that this handbook is doing. Because otherwise there might be additional things that should go in there if it's also for the community.
The handbook as presented is called the School Committee Member and Community Resource Handbook. I personally would be for keeping it focused on being a school committee member handbook, but I didn't feel strongly enough about it to make the case, I guess. So.
I think that was just a typo. We've been in and out of the document so many times adjusting things that I think that is just that we forgot to take it off. So it's being taken off right now, but that doesn't mean that in the future we might not want to also do a community resource handbook.
Yeah, that might be wonderful. Okay, so then who made the motion? I think it was...
I did.
Would you accept a friendly amendment to approve it as the school committee member handbook with, poor Susan, with the information added, formatting, and changing the title to school committee member handbook instead of school committee member and community resource handbook?
Of course.
And Member Martini, you seconded that. Are you okay with that amendment?
Yes.
Okay. Any other discussion? Well, I am so pleased with this. We're really building infrastructure as a school committee, thanks to your hard work and the budget committee's hard work. It's a lot to go from 0 to 1, and it's a lot easier to make a change from version 1 to version 2. And I love that you've included a process in here for revising the handbook annually, so it could be a living document and grow and become more and more useful to us over time. So thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
So with that, would you call for the vote?
Okay. Secretary Geneve, I'm yes. Vice Chair Martini?
Yes.
Chair Johnson-Musad?
Yes.
Mayor DeSorger?
Yes.
Member Goodwin?
Yes.
Member Sexton?
Yes.
Member Childs?
Yes.
Passes unanimously.
Congratulations. Thank you. Where it happened to my agenda got buried by the handbook. So I think we're on CES. Is that right? Where are we? Yes. Any items not reasonably anticipated? Member Goodwin? No.
No, I didn't make it. I got a flu shot and was down for 3 days.
Ouch.
So I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
bummer. Was that the meeting or the banquet or both?
It was the first meeting.
Okay.
The next one is in December.
Did they have
I
like
read their
the
minutes.
anniversary? They had like the anniversary
They had a
party.
big-
Did you get to go to that?
No, it was in Worcester.
Oh, yeah.
Too far for me.
Too bad. Okay. All right. City planning and construction rep.
So we met yesterday, and you did sort of anticipate it because we did talk about the elementary schools. So I figure I should probably wait till new business F, or do you want Cliff Notes right now?
Cliff Notes now. I don't think I could have anticipated what you discussed yesterday because the meeting was posted on Monday. So.
But you're psychic. No, I'm kidding.
If only.
So basically, we talked, we're looking at least 10 years out because we want it to be planned and strategic and not just slapdash. And especially because, especially for, these municipal buildings, we want grants. We want the state to pick up as much of the bill as possible. And to do those, it's a long process. And the more groundwork you put in advance, the more say you have over the final project, really. And so we did talk, the committee is split about the elementary school situation, where there's the financial side of things, where eventually taking care of only one building that is built to modern standards, especially modern HVAC, especially modern cooling with modern weather. I feel like I'm using the word modern way too much. Anyways, that there definitely could be a financial case for, but then there's also the community case of the neighborhood schools and the walking to school as opposed to buses. So it is something that the building committee is actively wanting to think about where Greenfield schools are going to be in 15, 20 years as opposed to right now. It is a forward-looking topic that, so that's where it is.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Okay.
Oh, I have a question.
Yeah.
Are they using the NASDAQ study? Because that one had far-reaching projections. Have they looked at that? Is that something they're using?
I am not sure. I should bring that to them directly just to make sure, because part of it, this was tacked onto a discussion of a different future study of buildings, and so my brain is jello.
Okay.
Mayor DeSorger?
I love that NASDAQ study. Actually, the discussion was multifaceted because it's sort of like the priority of what buildings one would need. And I think it deserves a lot more, talking about and thinking about. Something came forward about maybe we should be looking at this and what we should be doing with this or that, or many municipal buildings, city hall, a police station, schools, and you'd have to have all the department heads in there looking at it. And then projected enrollment, of course, would be important. I didn't feel, and correct me if I'm wrong, Member Child, I didn't feel like we reached a decision about that, but it was a great discussion to have.
That is accurate. It was a split committee without a consensus about the elementary school building's physical future.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, legislative representative?
Not this month, but next month I will have a report and a motion.
And Mask Division 5 representative?
Not this month, but next month I will have a report and a motion.
We missed you last time when we congratulated you on your award from Mask for your incredible work as a rep for us and really taking on this role that this committee decided to fill after a long time and really going with it and doing great work. So thank you so much for representing us so well.
You're very welcome. Thank you for nominating me.
Honestly, I wish I had. I don't know how you got.
You didn't
I
nominate
don't know
me?
how it got. I didn't know that there was a chance to nominate you. It must be someone
I thought
out there.
that's the only way.
You're so stunning that somebody somehow did it.
I'm going to get to the bottom of this, but I feel very proud, and I'm looking forward to all of us winning it. There's a future precedent here.
Yes, you're a great advocate for us all getting involved in Mask. That's wonderful. Please.
So Saturday we went to chartering the course, and our mayor was recognized as only one of 2 mayors who's ever attended chartering the course by Glenn Kuchar. So that.
Wow, thank you, Mayor, for making the time to go. We really appreciate it. That's great. And thank you for attending as well. So are we now at a full, everybody has been to charting the course? We've all charted. This is great. Good news. All right. District Wellness Committee representative. We should be well? Okay.
Should all be well.
All right. That means moving on. We have discussed item 7A, school resource officer in schools. The finance committee items, item 7B, have already been handled under the finance subcommittee report. We'll move on to policy. Do we need are either of these time sensitive that we need to vote tonight? I don't think so. No. Okay, so our new policy on policies calls for distribution of our draft policies. You receive them, then discussion of them, and then preferably, I think, at a future date, voting on them. So tonight, the idea is policy has such far-reaching implications that it helps to slow the process down a little bit if we can. So reviewing this student dress code policy, this was described under the policy item as Indigenous regalia. That's because this came to us originally as a request that we review our policies to make sure that, for example, someone who wished to graduate in Indigenous regalia wasn't prevented by our policies or procedures from being able to do that. So the superintendent worked with our attorney on this. Any comment?
No, our legal counsel advised, though, if you read the last line in red, that the legally protected status would cover, and then you wouldn't have to revise the policy if other legally protected status incidents came up where they wanted to wear such regalia, if it was a different culture or otherwise. So we did the general addition so that it would cover that as well as future incidents that may occur.
Any other questions or comments or discussion about the student dress code item? Member Childs?
So the first line in red, is there a typo in that line?
Good question. All right.
Because I think that sentence has had too many edits and some of them contradicted each other.
That might be true. Let me read it as it would be as presented. They have the right to determine how the student will dress, providing that attire is not destructive, complies with requirements for health and safety, and which administration reasonably and anticipates and/or cause disorder or disruption. That does sound at least minimally awkward, and if not, I'm not sure. So I guess this is a good reason for having a discussion.
What's funny is it's saying, okay, so the dress is not destructive, it complies with the requirements, and it causes disorder and disruption. So we need to get our negatives consistent.
Well, and I think what we'll do, because may and does not are very different, so I'm just going to run it by legal counsel one more time and then resend so that we have it accurately depicted, okay?
But the intent of it essentially is to make sure that dress doesn't cause disorder, disruption, or destruction, I guess. So the lawyers will work it out, and we'll have a new draft for you next month. Any other discussion? I'll just say that I'm glad that although we wouldn't think in the current environment that a young person would have difficulty wearing that type of regalia at graduation, it is really good to provide the protection in policy so that if the environment changes, that protection is still there via the policy. So we will take that up again at our next meeting. And next, we can review the foreign exchange student policy. Superintendent, would you cue this up for us?
Sure. If you recall, we had two families who were interested in enrolling two exchange students from foreign countries. We currently did not have a policy in place. MASC does not have an actual policy in place, but Liz LaFond found some other school districts who currently had a policy, shared some drafts with me, and then I worked alongside our attorney for the draft you see in front of you this evening. Because there is monetary compensation with some students regarding what visa they come over or what exchange program they are enrolled in, we did put some language in there so that folks were aware. We limited to up to 2 each year. The majority were under J1 visas, and the district does not receive compensation for students that are enrolled with a J1 visa. And then some other requirements that just align really with our registration process moving forward. I think at the end, we do need to develop some appropriate procedures moving forward after the policy is in place, but we first wanted to get a policy implemented so that when we have future requests, which we do have for potential January enrollment, the two families, unfortunately, that were interested in having them early, I guess there's very time-sensitive requirements around getting someone into a household, and to vote for them to be accepted, it was too delayed when we took it up at our last meeting. So those families, though, are looking to find different students who may want to come to Greenfield, and one, I think, has been successful for a January registration. So council just said if we could get a policy in place and approved, and then that we could streamline the process internally, which would be helpful for future experiences.
Thank you. Discussion? Not hearing any. Okay, we'll take that up for a vote at our next meeting. I'd like to hear a motion to move the item E, tuition underwriting petition, up to the next item so that we can try and get Member Deneve to be able to vote on this before she has to disappear from us. She's leaving at 9:30.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Member Deneve, will you call the vote?
Member Deneve, yes. Vice Chair Martini?
Yes.
Chair Johnson-Musad?
Yes.
Mayor DeSorger?
Yes.
Member Goodwin?
Yes.
Member Sexton?
Yes.
Member Childs?
Yes.
Passes unanimously.
Okay. Let's see. Jesus is here if you want to come up. I'd like to hear a motion to endorse the, let me see, I have written down the motion. I move that the Greenfield I'd like to hear a motion that the Greenfield School Committee endorse the petition as presented, the tuition underwriting petition.
So moved.
So moved by, motion by Member Childs. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Member Deneve. Jesus, do you want to just share a little overview for us and then we can discuss?
Sure. I think it's important to understand that most districts are facing this same challenge, and most districts are discussing this same challenge, but they're discussing it within their own district and not really outreaching to other districts about trying to challenge this particular funding dilemma because they don't really believe that it's possible to. I think that the more districts that are on record as wanting this to change, the more likely it is that we'll be able to actually have a conversation that'll result in a movement to change the legislature on this particular issue.
Thank you. Any questions or discussion?
I just want to thank you for all of the work you've put into this and commend you for your endurance and hanging in with us so long tonight.
Thank you. With any luck, this will also be on the agenda of 2 other school committees within the next couple of weeks.
Great. Mayor DeSorger?
I wanted to echo what Member Childs said because Jesus has actually been here through a couple of meetings on this, and I am quite impressed with his dedication and persistence. It's folks like him that get things passed. Thank you, Jesus Leyva.
Thank you.
All right. With that, you want to speak or you want to vote?
Oh,
Go ahead.
both.
Yeah, please.
This is one of the 3 issues that we discussed when we went to Day on the Hill. And it really resonated to the legislators when we had so many members from different committees. I mean, we had like 6 or 7 committees that we mobilized. So we can do that again. And it means a lot when we all come in and say we all have the same issue. These are our 3 top issues, and this is one of the things that has to change. So there's like 3 real concrete ways that we've identified of getting more money from the state, and this is one of the ways. So I think it's great if we can throw our support behind this, and it will signal to other school committees that are, considerably smaller and have much smaller student populations and don't have as much weight to throw around, that we can throw around weight with them. So I'm excited, and thank you, Jesus, for all of your work.
Thank you. I actually, since you brought it up, I think it's worth saying. I think part of the issue here is that we tend to think about which districts we should be allied with legislatively in very narrow terms. This is an issue that affects Boston, and they're not seeing the funding as a result of this. They get $228 million in Chapter 70 funding, and then they have $280 million in assessments against them for charter school public funding. The mayor of New Bedford 6 years ago wrote an article to the Mass Municipal Association about how charter school funding, public funding, negatively impacts public school districts. And only a couple of months ago, there was an editorial in the Berkshire Eagle from Pittsfield talking about how school choice impacts them as a low-income community. I think it's just really important that we start having these conversations as a group and recognizing that we do all, in fact, have a very similar issue. And again, it's not about whether charter schools are good or whether school choice are good as policy. It's who should pay for it, the municipality or the state.
Thank you. Mayor, are you asking to speak again? I'll take that as a no.
No, I just forgot to put my hand down, sorry.
Okay. Secretary Deneve, will you call the vote?
Yes, Secretary Deneve, yes. Vice Chair Martini?
Yes.
Chair Johnson-Masad?
Yes.
Mayor DeSorger?
Yes.
Member Goodwin?
Yes.
Member Sexton?
Yes.
Member Childs?
Yes.
Passes unanimously.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Are you taking off now, Secretary Deneve?
Well, according to technology, the kid is jamming out to the Cure in the kitchen, so I can stay for just a little.
Okay, well, all righty. Let's see, where are we now? Structure of business manager employment or contract. I feel like I'm not sure how, I did my best to be clear about what this item is about. I guess a little context. So currently we get our business manager services through a contract. Previously we had hired someone as a staff member to fill that role. So the item that we are discussing is whether the committee wishes to continue to contract with the vendor for that, or to structure the work as the work of an employee and do a employment search to find someone. So there are a couple different issues about this that we just need to be thoughtful about. One is that in our discussions, we can't at all focus on our evaluation of the contractor in terms of whether their work is satisfactory or non-satisfactory, or any complaints about them, because they have rights under open meeting law to be notified and to have those items in a executive session. We also, there are also items related to discussing compensation or strategic things involved in hiring, I believe, that might be covered under executive session. So we're not having either of those discussions. This is purely a discussion about how the work is structured, whether we want to continue with a contract or switch to have it be an employee role. So the current contract goes through June 2025 for context, and it's 9:35. So I guess one thing I was interested in learning more about, that I think before I could really vote, I would really want to have this context, and maybe you all would as well, is what is the environment like out there for hiring business managers? Because I feel like that, I'm someone who cares a lot about workers, and I kind of believe in hiring locally and having people with benefits and people, embedded in the school district. So all those arguments are great for me, but I know there are also many positions in the district that we contract out because it's just difficult to find qualified people for those roles. So I don't actually know enough about that. So I was wondering if the committee might consider asking the superintendent to kind of create a presentation for us on her, gather some information and share with us a presentation about the hiring kind of environment for this types of role, and present it to us in November. I say November just because as the superintendent presented to us, there's going to be a huge amount of work required of the administration with the reviews that Desi is doing. So that's, in December. In December. That's right, because mid-November is when all of our one-on-ones are happening, so it's going to be busy basically between now and then. So what do folks think about that? Member Goodwin.
So I had the same question that you had.
Yeah.
When I was at chartering, of course, I asked Liz and Glenn and the people there if it was impossible to find a business director, and they said they find them pretty regularly for districts.
Okay, thank you. Other comments or questions? Yeah.
If that's the case, is it possible to have MASC come up and talk to us about how that would look if we moved from a vendor to a staff position, and what we'd need to do and what the search would be about? Is that a search that we would have to pay for example, or is it just something that we would put out as a description, or we'd have to go to bid, right, if we chose a vendor? So I guess I just have a lot of like logistical questions about it that I need answered, and I'm wondering if MASC is just the resource to do that, especially if the superintendent is so very, very, very busy.
Absolutely, I'd be happy to talk to them and see if they can come to our November meeting and talk to us about that. Member Goodwin?
I've been on committees that have hired directors of business, and we must have a job description because we've had them.
Yeah, we do.
I think the last one was Steve Nimbercow. And
If you don't mind moving your microphone so that people can, I just want to make sure it's getting picked up.
The last one was Steve. I think the move to hiring a company was supposed to be a temporary solution because the superintendent was leaving. And I think it's time now. We're talking about things about building schools. We're talking about investing a lot of time in different things. And we have a lot of questions. And having somebody on the ground in Greenfield really, I think, will help us get questions answered. So I know I support the idea of a director of business that belongs to Greenfield Public Schools.
Okay. I think what I'd like to hear is a motion to direct the chair to discuss with Mask coming to our November meeting and making a presentation related to the business manager hiring environment and the logistics.
I'd make that motion.
Okay, a motion from Member Deneve. Is there a second? Second from?
Second.
Who seconded? Member Goodwin. Great. Any further discussion? And
I
yes.
have a comment or
Please.
additional question. I would need information about the potential and probable cost impact of either proceeding in our current structure or changing it to a employee.
Yep, that makes sense. And I guess some of that could be estimated and predictable. Another thing that could be non-predictable, if we did do a search and it wasn't successful, like what do we do then? That kind of thing. So those are the kinds, I will definitely bring that question to Mask and for the presentation in November.
Okay, thank you.
Can you turn your mic on?
I think we would review policy GCBB as well because it discusses the hiring of a school business administrator. It looks like the appointment, the superintendent manages the hiring process and then keeps the school committee informed. The committee votes on the appointment based upon superintendent's recommendation.
Great, thank you. Okay, any other discussion? The motion to ask Mask to come and work with us on this in November. Okay, Member Deneve, will you call the vote?
Secretary Deneve, yes. Vice Chair Martini?
Yes.
Chair Johnson-Musad?
Yes.
Mayor DeSorger?
Yes.
Member Goodwin?
Yes.
Member Sexton?
Yes.
Member Childs?
Yes.
Passes unanimously.
Okay, great. I got an email from Member Martini requesting this item on new elementary school subcommittee, and I'm hoping that I will I've created a good motion here, Member Martini, but if it isn't what you were hoping for, please let me know. But the motion would be to create an ad hoc subcommittee to research and present a proposal on whether to set a goal of constructing a new elementary school. How does that sound?
Sounds good to me.
Okay, great. I'd like to hear that motion.
So moved.
Motion from Member Martini. Is there a second? I'll second it. Let's just, any discussion? Okay, I think the idea was, it started to come up tonight with Member Childs representing us on that construction committee, but I think it would be good for us as a school committee to have a picture of whether this is something we think needs to happen, and then we can look at the feasibility of it. So I thought perhaps having a subcommittee, ad hoc subcommittee, whose role was to research it and make a proposal to us on what our stance should be as a school committee would be good. Mayor?
Before I voted on this, the makeup of the ad hoc committee is like, how is that going to be determined, Chair?
The way our policy describes the staffing of committees and subcommittees is for the chair to put forward a slate, basically, and then the school committee can vote up or down on the members to be assigned to the subcommittee.
Thank you.
And so if we do vote to go forward with this, I would love to hear from people if you would like to be on it. And I guess I'd make the appointment of the members at the next meeting. Member Martini?
I just wanted to provide a little context. So while we have been going through the process of discussing redistricting and integrating our schools in the recent past, we really had to wrestle with some difficulties that could not be addressed within our current buildings. For example, we made this concerted effort to not only integrate, but also move our 5th grade back to elementary school. But there was an actual wish to move 6th grade back to elementary school. And that was not, it was kind of a non-starter given our current buildings and availability. And also, we have had discussions in regards to the spaces and facilities we have available for students with disabilities in our current schools, which I would like to discuss more. Of course, we have confronted a number of physical issues with our existing elementary school buildings, which are aging and present some really significant concerns. The original Newton School building having been built in 1915, and for example, and the configuration of Federal Street School and the difficulties that presents in making it physically accessible for disabled students and other concerns, has just led to this topic coming up multiple times over my experience on the committee the last few years as to the wish to consider pursuing a new unified elementary school. And we keep talking about it, but unless there is a structure put into place to have a codified, well-researched conversation about it, we'll just keep talking about it. And I would like to move the conversation forward. So I would very much support having an ad hoc committee to get this going.
Mayor DeSorger?
So I think that's a very good idea to have to have a committee that's looking at this, but it needs to be a diversified committee, a committee that has diversity of thought. That's all I would say. So I don't know. I am thinking about whether or not I'll vote in favor of that. Well, so I'm going to ask the chair. This is my question to the chair before I vote. Will the folks be appointed to the ad hoc committee that have a diversity of thought on this?
Well, I think it's a trickier question than you might expect, because if I polled people for their opinions on the topic before assigning them to the committee, they'd essentially be potentially deliberating outside of a public session. So I don't actually know where people stand on it, and that, I guess my intent would be to choose people for the committee based on their interest and their willingness to work hard on the issue in a good faith manner without doing a litmus test for what their views were in advance of assigning them. And hope that, that if we have 3 people on the committee, that would be enough of diversity. But I hear your concern. I'm just not sure exactly how to address it. Member Goodwin?
There's a lot to think about with this, and it's almost 10 o'clock. So could we make the motion to vote the next meeting on this? Because I know I'd like to really think about this a little more, and my brain shuts down at 9.
Sure, you could do a motion to lay the motion on the table.
I move that we table this till our next meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's not debatable, so I will call the vote. Member Goodwin?
Yes.
Member Childs?
Yes.
Member Sexton?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Mayor DeSorger?
Yes.
All right, the motion is okay. Sorry, Member Martini.
Yes.
Motion to table passes unanimously. That's when we're on to requests for future agenda items. Member Sexton?
It seemed like there was a desire to have an agenda item discussing the process by which warrants are approved.
Okay, great. We can add a process by which warrants are approved to the next agenda. Any other requests? Not hearing any. I would take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by the mayor. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Member Goodwin. Any discussion? Okay, I'll call the vote. Mayor DeSorger?
Yes. Yes.
Member Goodwin?
Yes.
Member Martini?
Yes.
Member Childs?
Yes.
Member Sexton?
Yes.
Member Johnson Musad? I am a yes. We are adjourned at 9:52 p.m.